with Austin Picard. We've already done a few episodes. We have more stuff coming out. You're a quote-unquote conspiracy researcher, but very well researched. You use real data, and then you let people draw their own conclusions. We're going to talk about Son of Sam murders today. And I haven't done a lot of research into this. We just filmed one yesterday. I don't think it's coming out next week that I spent the last week sucked into. But Son of Sam, there's all these cult connections, MKUltra possibly. It gets crazy, but I'll let you start off. Like, where's a good place to start with the story?
Honestly, with David Berkowitz, it's such a fascinating story because, and I won't get into the conclusion instantly, and I think first we should kind of begin with, there's a strange, interesting concept we should introduce, which begins with this institution, right? A correctional institution, which so often this is the case, and it's called Chillicothe Correctional Institution. It's where Charles Manson was incarcerated in the early 1950s, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. So during this time, he experiences a major turnaround in his life, right? And basically, this is when he learns these mind control techniques that he develops and utilizes on the family during his time, which is where he gets this strange version of orange sunshine acid, this strange, psychedelic compound that was legitimately in a lab by the Central Intelligence Agency created to be utilized in this strange sort of concept of implementing this behavioral modification, mind control experimentation programming. And so they could essentially develop not only serial killers, but Manchurian candidate assassins, potentially robotic assassins that they could trigger like a Sirhan, right? And
just
so,
real quick, everything you're saying probably sounds insane to some people. It's 100% verified that CIA was using acid to test people on mind control, the MKUltra. This is like 100% verifiable. There's nobody denies this seriously.
Absolutely.
This is verifiable stuff, and there's lots of links to serial killer, which are insane. I just started going down that rabbit hole. Like I said, I have one coming next week on that. But anyway, sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to make it clear that people know this isn't like speculation. This is hardcore, proven.
Yeah, and when you have like examples such as this, right, a U.S. Navy psychologist, he claims that the Office of Naval Intelligence, right, had taken convicted murderers from military prisons, used behavior modification techniques on them, and then relocated them into American embassies throughout the entire world internationally. So the Navy psychologist, his name was, I believe, Dr. Thomas Narut. He's a lieutenant commander.
He's an actual Navy high-ranking psychologist.
Absolutely.
Not some random dude.
Not a random guy. He's legitimately like, I believe, Lieutenant Commander Thomas Narut, U.S. Regional Medical Center in Naples is where he was actually located and stationed in Italy. So he divulged this information at an Oslo NATO conference, and this is basically in attendance were like over 120 psychologists from all over the world. I think the 11 Nation Alliance at the time. And basically you have the Navy providing all the funding necessary to essentially, and this is according to Dr. Narut himself, in a question and answer session with reporters from all these various nations, 11 nations, he reveals that the Navy was secretly programming large numbers of assassins. He said that the men he had worked with for the Navy basically were being prepared for commando-type operations. Wow. And this is as well as covert operations in U.S. embassies all over the world. So if you just imagine that concept playing out, right, in terms of developing not only a potential mind-controlled assassin that you could trigger at any given moment, but they also had split personality spies that they wanted to develop just to essentially, they wanted to present, like basically offer intelligence, send intelligence through this robotically triggered alternate personality of a mind-controlled asset without the asset themselves even being aware of that information whatsoever.
Yeah. That's the whole purpose of MKUltra. They were splitting these personalities, and we've done some other podcasts talking about how it's dark, how a lot of it's very dark how they do it, but that ties into a lot of the satanic panic, all this stuff.
Exactly.
So it shows, I don't want to get too into this, but there was this whole serial killer epidemic. Then it turned into mass shooters.
Exactly. And that is why, oh my gosh, when you have, there's a Harvard professor by the name of Dr. Robert Duncan, right? Mm-hmm. And it was in 2012 I saw him give this interview. And it makes perfect sense because it's the same exact time that the Aurora, Colorado Century 16 cinema shooting, I believe it was, in Aurora with James Holmes as the perpetrator allegedly acting alone. Which is fascinating that Dr. Robert Duncan would obviously feel the need to kind of publicly expose this concept. And he had developed this conclusion through a scientific trial with basically a consortium of scientists that he had worked with over the course of, like, I believe it was 8 years, over 8 years. And he claimed that they had actually interviewed hundreds of alleged Manchurians, modern Manchurian candidates that were in this modern operation known as Manchurian. It's crazy. It's basically Manchurian Operation Program Free is the name of it, is what Dr. Robert Duncan claimed.
These like people built that they can tune on at any time for assassin.
Exactly.
Like to go kill President Trump or attempt to, or just any assassin that doesn't make sense.
Yes, and that actually...
a lot of people could see all these assassins. None of them make sense for Trump. Like 2 of them are in BlackRock commercials.
Right.
And I don't have a strong theory. I'm just saying we see oddities.
Exactly. And when you consider the fact that I didn't realize that in 2016 there was an assassination attempt, or at least an attempt to grab the service revolver of a security guard at a Trump campaign in Las Vegas, right? It was actually in Las Vegas. It was at one of the casinos. And it turns out it was it was at a campaign rally. They were holding an event at this casino in Vegas. And essentially you had this young British, he was like from the UK and he was on the spectrum, right? He was autistic, I believe, but highly functioning. And his name was Michael Sanford. And it turns out that there's an individual by the name of James Wesley Howell who he was caught with an arsenal in his vehicle at the LA Pride Parade the day after Omar Mateen shot up the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. And so James Wesley Howell, the day after Omar Mateen shoots up the Pulse nightclub, the alleged, it's a homosexual nightclub. The point was, he goes on the record, James Wesley Howell, claiming that he actually was intending on going to the gay pride parade to shoot it up. Yeah. Now, strange, right? Motivation at that
two at the same
convenient time.
They wanted to be shot up, so that would have caused some kind of crazy media storm.
Right.
And like I said, we're still trying to figure out why this stuff's going on, but it's we'll get into the end. But there's direct ties between all these occults and intelligence agencies. That's the strangest part.
Oh, no doubt.
But the Son of Sam murders are some of like the most famous murders ever.
Right.
What would he was terrorizing New York City, just shooting people in cars, or?
Oh man, no, it's far more than that. It seems as if some of the murders, like the Stacy Moskowitz murder, was allegedly even filmed by a crew in a van nearby whenever the murder happened. And I don't believe David Berkowitz was responsible for her death. It's kind of fascinating, but he even mentioned a woman who was a member of the cult known as the Process Church of the Final Judgment was flown in to participate in this ritual murder. And the date of it as well. Like these occult murders happened around these specific dates, right?
Well, I don't want to get too off track, but the one we have coming up next week, we talk about, and we have hard evidence in this one. The snuff films, all the connections, flying across states. There's just so many these different cases, similarities. I'd never heard this was potentially filmed.
Oh my gosh, it's fascinating, and I just wanted to reiterate because I was just trying to recall, from memory, Dr. Robert Duncan, specifically his statement, what he had claimed about the modern Manchurian candidate program.
This is that psychologist, the Navy psychologist, a very person that would know.
Dr. Robert Duncan is the Harvard professor, and he's the one who worked with the consortium of scientists on this alleged modern Manchurian candidate program. And so he says, again, Harvard graduate, investigator and author of a book known as Project Soulcatcher, I believe is the name, Secrets of Cyber and Cybernetic Warfare Revealed. And he explains in this 2012 interview that over the past 10 years, so it was over 10 years, he had personally interviewed more than 650 people who claimed to have been under government mind control. Many of them said they were in the Manchurian Candidate ID program free. So then he goes on and he explains that he went to the Senate Intelligence Committee and met with 26 senators, as well as the head of the Los Angeles FBI. And after working with this consortium of scientists, it turns out this is a research project for over 8 years. The closest estimate that they could come to, basically, was that there are about 10,000 Manchurian candidates in the works being programmed by the CIA right now that can be used at any time around the world.
so they could turn on a lot if they wanted.
Right.
And obviously you could argue that just saying it doesn't mean it's true, but some of these other cases we've researched, there's lots of reasons pointing directly to these. The reason we're doing several episodes because it gets so confusing, but it's just like, you got to break it down in pieces. Otherwise people are like, you're a complete madman. But it's like, there's so many of these cases, direct, like John Wayne Gacy, the fact that like he goes right to the government ties, all these serial killers and snuff films. It's like, there's all the same patterns you see everywhere.
And that's exactly what Berkowitz was claiming. Child pornography was involved with this cult, and same as the snuff films being involved.
All these cults.
Yes.
It's so weird. It's hard to believe. Like, it took me a while till I saw Detroit case in Belgium. If you guys want to go something, the darkest thing you ever see, you can see that. That's the most haunting thing. That's when I realized it was all real, because it matched all the ones in the U.S., every single detail. And
no, it really is the one that, for me, I didn't resurface the same. It's like I lost a little part of me.
That's why some of you guys might not even want to look at that case, to be honest. But that's when I realized it was all real, because they had the bodies, they had the procure, they had the system, the government involvement, the cult involvement.
You read the X dossier of the details of what those victims endured.
Yeah,
you don't want
maybe
to.
at a later date we'll do something on that. But we already did something so dark yesterday that we're gonna air later. So
and it's honestly, it's just.
But if you really want to, like, if you're questioning this stuff being crazy, there's a place to go look.
And
but
it's
be ready to be haunted.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to conceptualize or comprehend and even internalize for yourself if you have a moral bone in your body. If you have any sort of ethical framework as a human being, it's something that,
and there are these massive groups in all of them. Like Detroit, there was tons of people involved, including women helping them kidnap little children. It's just
school teachers.
There's court convictions on this one. That's why this is a good one to send people.
Yeah, school
teachers. And then all
teachers.
the witnesses and prosecutors and stuff started dying.
Exactly. You have school teachers. You have police protectors who are helping with the abduction process. You have the gendarme officers who had basically, you had members of the gendarmes, which in Belgium is just the FBI essentially, who had been compromised and were part of the network and helping essentially protect it and facilitate the, any sort of disruption of the criminal investigation is really what was happening as well. And that happens so very often. Yeah,
we don't want to get off on these at the time, but if you guys also want to look where you see the identical things, the problem is there's not convictions in bodies, but you see the exact story. You have the finders, you have Franklin scandal, the Presidio with Michael Aquino. So you have all, you see the exact same pattern. All these.
Yep. You have McMartin. You have there are too many examples to legitimately for comfort whatsoever. Plus, all of these abductions that you can point to that seem to fit a profile, right? That have this talk about pattern recognition, which isn't something to solely rely on. Obviously, you need credible evidence.
Well, that's why the ones when there's like actual arrests, bodies, and victims are the best. Which yesterday's podcast did that. The Detroit case is that's the most haunting.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, like I said, there's so much he's got track. Let's get into the Son and Sam killings.
Sounds good. And really, it's like. It's interesting to me
this
because
is all a little connected, though. Sorry, but
no, it really is. And you have, what's fascinating is I believe that there is this sort of satanic network that has been now very much a cult, in regard to their ideological practices, right, and kind of the structure of their philosophy. And you have like, what I didn't realize is there are kind of so many different various examples you can use, like a Henry Lee Lucas in the Hand of Death cult, who he had a gay lover named Otis Toole, who was also a serial killer, and they both happened to basically claim that they were recruited into a satanic cult known as the Hand of Death, and this was a cult filled with basically assassins and hitmen who were also being trained in how to kidnap and procure young children.
Just real quick, I don't want to keep talking about it, but because yesterday, the one we did is coming out next week with John Wayne Gacy, he had multiple accomplices. He had another guy that worked for him when he got raided, went and did 20 serial killers for Satan, and his basically doesn't have Wikipedia. He's erased. The Ripper Crew you can look up, but the head guy, all the other guys said he was using mind control. You have this other guy, Dean Carroll, connected to them. So you have this whole group of connected serial killers with government ties, shells companies. There was a guy that they were probably working for. What Norman,
John David Norman,
who had like all 30 to 100,000 records of clients, meticulous details, all the children, some of the ones that had been killed in these things. Yeah. He got arrested. His files, the police didn't save them. The State Department came up. Some Jewish guy at the State Department destroyed them all. The Chicago Tribune somehow got them as well. They also destroyed them.
Yes.
And everyone said they're the most meticulous records ever. It has all the high-ranking people of government. So this operation is just, like I said, that'll be coming out next week. This is so high.
It is.
Like I said, we want to focus on Son of Sam, but this stuff is all connected. And
It is.
It took me a while to start believing it because it seems so crazy, but the more research things just keep hitting, that's why it's kind of hard because it's too much to get in all at once. So that's why it's good to focus on one or two things.
Right. And I think this is so great as far as like, the only reason I mentioned Henry Lee Lucas and the Hand of Death is because I feel like he fits the perfect profile of the concept of David Berkowitz, of what effectively happened with Son of Sam. And what he claimed on the record. And by the way, both Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole would basically be saved and spared from execution in separate states, both run by members of the Bush family at the time.
Wow. The Bush
Florida
family
and Texas.
has so many dark angles. Interesting.
Yeah. So George W. Bush.
You wouldn't think they would stop a murder of a serial killer either. Those are the guys that should be pushing death penalty.
And they always did. George W. Bush
weird.
legitimately, he allowed the execution of an old grandmother who was literally using self-defense because of her abusive husband.
That's crazy because they're like pro-death penalty. So for them to take these like crazy psycho killers, that's bizarre.
Commute the sentence of one of the most, and if you look at a picture, you just pull up a picture of Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole, it's the Jimmy Savile effect. It's like, oh, of course, this guy did it.
You just see the evil in them.
Right. It's terrible to say that, but
lots of these evil killers, the patterns we're seeing is they did some of these murders, but then they're blamed on a lot more.
Yeah.
And like they'll be afterwards. So they're not trying to get off. They're admitting to being a murderer, but they're just saying like, oh no, I had a whole team.
Yeah.
Be like, oh, well, they're just lying to get off. Like, no, they're not trying to get off. They're saying like, I killed, like Gacy's killed 5 of them. What did Son of Sam say? He killed 3 of them, something like that.
Exactly. And what's insane to me is that I thought you would find this absolutely fascinating. So you have essentially an individual who was basically, his name was, again, Henry Lee Lucas, a convicted serial killer. So he's largely considered to have been one of many, obviously, criminally insane patients who were unknowingly forced into the CIA's mind control, behavioral modification, experimentation. And that was while he was admitted at Ionia State Prison. I believe it was before he was paroled in 1970. And then he goes on to kill at least 2 women before he's ultimately arrested in 83. So while he's incarcerated for these crimes, this is so crazy because he all of a sudden falsely confesses to over 600 additional murders.
Jesus.
Yeah. And this is to Texas Rangers and other law enforcement. And Adam Walsh, right?
Was there any credibility to the murders he was saying? Did he know
many of
information on
them? But he just started taking the rap for a strange.
So he was trying to take credit for one, but he knew a little bit, like someone was.
Oh yeah,
him.
absolutely.
So maybe someone
he was taking
feeding
them the bodies.
so he was giving him
He was taking them
taking
the
the bodies.
Yeah, but it was very strange. But at the same time, it was almost like he was taking the fall for the wider network.
That is interesting because no, he did 600, but he knew enough for them to credit it with him.
He goes on a nationwide killing spree with Otis Toole, his gay lover. Right, this is so crazy, and it comes down to there was this 7-year-old boy named Adam Walsh. And unfortunately, he's abducted from a Sears department store, right? And this is in Hollywood Mall in Hollywood, Florida. And this is July 27th, 1981. His severed head is found 2 weeks later in a drainage canal, right? And basically, this is alongside Highway 60. And you have convicted serial killer Otis Toole, who would become the gay lover of Henry Lee Lucas, repeatedly confessing to essentially Adam's kidnapping and murder, but then retracts his story. He would later ultimately confess to the crime all over again for some reason. And then he's never convicted of the crime because evidence was apparently lost. And Otis Toole ultimately recanted his confession until admitting again to the crime one final time on his deathbed.
The amount of loss is that we've been going through these cases the last few days. The amount of lost evidence and destroyed evidence is just mind-blowing.
So here's
police incompetence to where maybe it's beyond incompetence, almost like cover-ups.
Oh, yeah. No, I believe that there are more beyond a shadow of a doubt in my mind, just in terms of like being exposed to legitimate investigators with integrity and principle.
As a consequence of being truly a free speech podcast, I've been demonetized on YouTube, X, Facebook, and almost everywhere else. To be able to fund the podcast, I rely fully on support from viewers like you. You can support the podcast by going to fightbackpodcast.com, where you can buy merch or sign up to become a member, which will have early access and extra content. I'm definitely not going anywhere, and I really appreciate all of your guys' support.
And
100%.
Right.
That's the thing. There's definitely going to be good cops looking for stuff, but it seems like
They're
a lot
the
of times
minority.
there's constantly roadblocks being
Yes.
put into extreme cases.
exactly. Most, I think there's
I
also
don't
this
wanna go back
tribal.
to Crow, but there's the case is so extreme there when there's a girl screaming in his basement
Oh my gosh.
because he got called by the neighbors, and the cop yells "shut up" and left, and then he got promoted.
Yeah, exactly, because he was a part of the network and being obviously rewarded for facilitating a cover up and just to be aware of that fact that he had a makeshift
it won't be most
dungeon.
cops. Yeah.
No, yeah.
You hear girls screaming. The neighbors had called. His own mother had called. This guy had already
Yes.
been arrested for kidnapping and torturing children.
Exactly.
But he got, again, another guy who got hardly any time, just like Jeffrey Epstein.
Yep.
You see the same thing with all these procurers and stuff. They're like let out instantly.
Yeah, and so when you have, and again, so many of these examples that we point to, it turns out that there is direct police and high level, just prominent political figures involved and implicated in the
That's
network.
what's hard to comprehend, I think. It just seems unbelievable, but if you really start connecting the patterns everywhere. And the funny part is today, we'll probably show this next week, literally I think it was like Congress is having hearings on like MKUltra, or was it yesterday or something,
Yeah.
about this mind
Oh my
control
God,
stuff
that's
and
crazy,
connections to
right.
like the killing of JFK. And this is like, these projects are most likely what's behind this. But
They're
the weird,
admitting.
along with these satanic cults, which I haven't figured out why they're all involved, but there clearly are a direct
Now,
connection between these killers, cults, and the CIA.
You remember I told I told you about I told you yesterday about basically the penal colony, the William Holsinger, the aide to Congressman Leo Ryan, who was lured down to Guyana and killed at Jonestown, right?
Yeah, it was Jonestown, some of the biggest, most people probably heard of it, some of the biggest murder case
Oh, yeah.
ever. It's crazy. This guy investigating stuff. I didn't realize he was the congressman that was killed down there.
Exactly. Allegedly revolutionary mass suicide because of, this character, Jim Jones. But in reality, it was an intelligence operation,
He
I
was
believe.
probably an MKUltra because
Yep.
he was also heavily involved in politics.
They were
voter
utilizing behavioral modification. So the point was that William Holsinger, he authored a letter called The Penal Colony, right? And this is just after William Holsinger gets a call. Well, Congressman Leo Ryan's dead. He gets a call before it's even made public, and they say, your meal ticket just had his brains blown out. Yeah,
wasn't
and
even
told him
public
to stay quiet, basically. And it was they were sending a message.
Yeah,
He was a CIA
obviously-
watchdog.
Obviously, a very real threat. 'Cause
Exactly. And for him to actually be attempting to hold the CIA accountable at this time, that didn't sit well with them.
there's a pattern of deaths of anyone doing serious research or investigation in these rules. When someone's in a position when they actually could do things,
Right.
they, plane goes down.
Absolutely.
Or they shoot themselves twice in the head.
Yeah,
stuff like
exactly.
this.
Worst case suicide you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And that's why with William Holsinger, he authors that penal colony letter, and basically he suggests exactly what we all should have known by now, and that is MKUltra never ended. After the church committee hearings.
Because MKUltra, I think they found the financial records, but most of the records were destroyed, and they're like, "Oh, it ended, guys."
Exactly.
So we
I
don't even
believe-
know what they went with it. We have a little couple pieces we found of talking about how they've succeeded in implementing memories in people's heads. They literally say they've succeeded at it.
Exactly. And when you have, honestly, when it comes down to William Holsinger's penal colony letter, I think this is very interesting because he legitimately says, and he said personally, that he feared that the CIA might have been running a covert operation at Jonestown so sinister it would shock even hardened CIA watchdogs, he says. In 1980, Holsinger already discovered a CIA asset by the name of Richard Dwyer was at Jonestown at the time, and you can even hear it on the last suicide tape. Jim Jones says, "Is that Dwyer? Get Dwyer out of here," because he had just come back from Port Cayuma, but that's a whole nother story. The point is that he basically, so he sent this paper, William Holsinger did, from a professor at UC Berkeley, and it was called The Penal Colony, right? And so the paper detailed how the CIA's mind control program, MKUltra, never stopped in 1973, as the CIA had told Congress. Instead, the paper reported it had merely been transferred out of public hospitals and prisons into the more secure confines of religious cults. And Jonestown
So they moved into these cults.
was
that
one of
explains
those
this
cults.
cult connection that I keep seeing.
Yeah.
And this is worldwide, not just in America.
Exactly.
And that's what the Son of Sam's was tied to a cult.
100%. And that's why I think it's important to consider this framework of what a covert and clandestine operation looks like domestically in the U.S. because the CIA is obviously violating their charter. They are not supposed to be operating domestically in the U.S. we all know
Yeah.
they've been operating within the confines.
Sometimes it's multiple agencies together, like how the State Department came in and destroyed the records of the largest pedophile bust in history, linking all the government.
This is how you compartmentalize an operation and also provide yourself with plausible deniability by, this is I think in terms of there's no real distinction between, these various intelligence agencies. I think they're all just kind of, not to say there aren't individuals that mean well within.
Yeah, there's probably a lot, but the people that manage to get power, they put these people in there. They only need a few if they're the ones. So you see it in all these different cases of stonewalling, of messing things up, destroying evidence, having shadow commissions like the 9/11.
And Anna Paulina Luna actually saying that today when that clip that I sent you earlier of basically they're claiming that Jack Ruby and Charles Manson are CIA MKUltra assets.
No, good timing. They're talking about this like the Congress, like this is stuff we've been talking about for a while. I think Epstein opened people up a little more too, seeing that there was this giant like shadow government above our government. They still won't release the files despite them being mandatory. Rumors of them having snuff films and all that.
Pedophile occupied government.
Exactly. So I think people are a little more open. And like I said, research the stuff too, everything we're saying.
Exactly. Please do, because once you do, it's the point of no return.
Yeah, they said
good luck.
The Sam case I'm not that familiar with, but the case we have going next week, I got just sucked in, bro. And it's all just stuff that you can find on mainstream sources. 100%. Yeah, you have to do it's only a small amount of speculation, but it becomes so apparent once you put it together that it has to be. Like things like, the mass shooters. I'll admit I'm fully speculating that, but it fits patterns.
Oh my gosh.
So I don't have like hard evidence of that by any means, but you can just see once you start seeing these patterns, and there was kind of, I would say, a pretty hard evidence the governments were involved in some of these serial killers.
Absolutely. And I for the sake of the Son of Sam case, I won't go off on a tangent on modern mind control, essentially, and Manchurian mass shooters.
By the way, you speak to a very conspiracy for my audience. You have a podcast that's of hardcore conspiracy stuff.
Absolutely.
So that's why I have to try to keep you
reined in and
sometimes I have a
bridled.
conversation with you where you're mentioning, we talked a week or two ago, and you're all over the place. I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? But then you sent me a couple Wikipedias, and then unfortunately I spent like 5 hours that night wide awake piecing it all together, and I was just like, oh my God, called you the next day like freaking out, seeing why you're here, there, just like.
No, it's something that once you're exposed to it, it's the point of no return. There's no turning back. You've intellectually overexposed yourself, and good luck with the paradigm of power and the way it's currently structured.
It's always good to like give one piece at a time. Like for a while I was talking about Israel and the Jays a lot, and would never give anyone too much at once. I'd give them one little thing to look up, then give them another thing to look up. Because you give it to them all once and look at you like, you're fucking crazy.
I know.
But then you start giving them this, give them that. And well, MKUltra is all ran by
exactly
people.
And you see what the author of Chaos, right? What's his name? Tom O'Neill. He was there actually testifying today, at least on that clip with Anna Paulina Luna in regard to Jack Ruby and Jack Charles
Ruby,
Manson.
Killed Oswald. Everyone knows Manson, the most famous case.
Exactly. But I thought it was interesting, because Tom O'Neill, right? Obviously, he wrote the Chaos book, but he seemed to steer clearly away from the Process Church connection. I get it in terms of maybe not wanting to potentially discredit yourself by including.
Did read that book. That was a really good book on
it's
the
a
Manson
great
murder,
book
because there is just again the official story is complete bullshit. We're not getting right now, but the official story is complete
And if
bullshit.
you remember what he says about Louis Jolyon West, the MKUltra operative, who's like basically second to Alan Dulles and Sidney Gottlieb,
but he was definitely very high up. To me, looked kind of like probably the number 2 guy.
Yeah, exactly. And when you have him showing up and within, I think it was the time frame of 30 minutes or something, he meets privately alone with Jack Ruby, and he has basically a psychological break
all
he
these
never
people
returned
he would
from.
show up and demand to meet all these famous cases. It's like he's
crazy. It's fascinating, and it seems as if this is how. And by the way, he became a member of the scientific advisory board of something known as the False Memory Syndrome Foundation.
And he literally was implementing false mememories. He
That's
literally
what I'm saying.
admits
exactly.
to doing it, that I'm implementing false memories. I've had success. There's a letter they picked up of him because they stored a lot of the records. But it was to the Sydney he wrote, I've successfully implemented the memories.
Yeah. And so he would.
And they were using
have
torture,
the audacity,
like all kinds of stuff. This is like acid. This is well-known stuff.
Exactly. And then to have the audacity, right, to basically develop an organization known as the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, with a scientific advisory board filled with MKUltra operatives who are legitimately infiltrated hundreds and hundreds of the most high-profile criminal cases, especially the ones that seem very worthwhile in questioning the official narrative in terms of the perpetrators.
This pisses me off, this motherfucker. Like,
yeah, man.
Because he was literally implementing these false memories, and he's like, oh, it starts to...
They injected themselves into that McMartin case so quickly to
that's
undermine those children.
And they're
the false
attacking
memory
young
syndrome
children
foundation.
until they go and found out, like, oh, it actually existed. What
Exactly. But in reality, the foundation itself is attempting to claim that any sort of like mind control conception of a false memory is basically pseudoscientific. Like they're trying to undermine the credibility.
That's what MKUltra was doing, and he successfully did it. And splinting personalities. There's some dark stuff, like the one where the guy put in a trance, and then he killed a girl and woke up not knowing what he'd done. And I believe that's really
Jimmy Shaver case.
I think he generally woke up from a trance after fucking being with the Jolly West guy and killed a child. Could you just imagine just the horror? Of just, oh my God, that's just.
And that's what makes you wonder, like the concept of free will. Like how much is it a suggestibility just in nature? Maybe human beings might just kind of like might be a diverse range of.
I think there's multiple ways. I think you're perfectly hitting it. There's people that are just kind of lured into it. People that are completely abused through drugs and torture, but then a lot of times they teach them how to convince people to do things.
Absolutely.
Like Charles Manson, like a lot of those serial killer cases we were talking about, like the Dean Carr, they convince other people to go along with them. The Ripper murder, they said it felt like he had mind control over them.
This is how it goes, and that's the same thing with Mark Dutroux, mind control manuals in the home. It's like this is what. Yeah, absolutely.
Mind control manuals.
Oh man, two of the girls who were abducted by Dutroux, they were actually at a hypnotist of this. So it was a nightclub where a hypnotist was performing on stage. The nightclub happened to be owned by members of the network connected to Michelle Nihul, who is claimed to have been the ringleader. Wow. And so it turns out these two girls who were effectively abducted the very night they attended this show with a hypnotist, those two girls were chosen out of the audience to be hypnotized on stage, and they were acting as if they were still in a trance when the entire rest of the audience left, and those girls were never seen again. And it's
just so bizarre because it ties. Well, there's also the blackmail we have in Imp. It's like the blackmail factor of it, the mind control. Do they actually worship these gods? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. But it's like
it's hard to say that. It's hard to dismiss.
They all have snuff films involved. Like that one definitely did.
And also, imagine like. And especially with Son of Sam, it's the ultimate evil because they're attempting to basically engage in the ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah. No, they definitely they create these cults that go out and do sacrifices to these gods. I'm just wondering if the people behind it, like the Ultra, believe it or not. I don't know the answer to that.
I wonder as well.
But like the Process Church, right? That's the one behind Son of Sam.
Exactly, it is. And I believe that they also had a part to play within the Hand of Death. And so just to finish.
A lot of these churches are interconnected.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like the intelligence agencies, like I said.
Scientology.
People will say CIA, but really it's all connected.
Right.
The State Department, it's all like one.
Robert
they have
de
people
Grimston.
here, people there.
Right. Robert de Grimston and Marianne McLean de Grimston, who's his wife, Robert was basically the Christ figure of he founded the Process Church of the Final Judgment after having a falling out with L. Ron Hubbard as an elite member of the Church of Scientology. Yes.
L. Ron Hubbard was tied into
Jack Parsons, the Babylon working
Mason.
Oh, yes.
And that's again tied to these Egyptian gods, just like Michael. I'm trying to get off. It's just so crazy when you see these connections. Michael Aquino worships Set.
Yes.
And then these guys are these are high important people. Michael Aquino's a high end.
They believe in blood ritual. And I think that they believe in harnessing some sort of...
actually believe it through power. Yeah, that's what I go back and forth on. Like, is it just a mind thing, or do they legitimately believe it? And I kind of lean that way too.
Right. It seems like they very much do practice these things in a real esoteric and ideological way where we're talking, like I said before, the dates themselves matter. The timing of the summer solstice, things of that nature, are occult ritualistic holidays that they take advantage of. And that's when they try to maximize the basically the death ritual.
So
Yeah.
it's like these people, they're definitely using these cults to do this stuff.
Oh yeah.
If they believe in these gods, it seems like they do, but that's like I said, the audience make their own determination.
Right. And it's hard to really come to a firm conclusion on
Yeah,
that.
there's no way we could know 100% without
Right.
And
the individual always matters, obviously. Like,
some of them deeply believe it. You can tell some people are getting brought along.
And is the leadership and the hierarchy of the cult itself, like as you were saying and alluding to, are they as entirely, let's just say, what's the term when you're radically religious? Either way, you get the point, right? Where they're basically radically in line with the ideology itself, and they're actually practicing it in a rigorous fashion, or are they actually just manipulating the acolytes?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going back and forth on. People like the Ripper crew. Was he deeply really a Satanist, or was he just telling the guys that? I don't know the answer to that.
It's hard to judge, and again, it's up to the individual.
They're 100% using these churches to do these sacrifices.
That's undeniable for me personally, and I will say the only thing that I wanted to mention was this paramilitary camp where Otis Toole and Henry Lee Lucas claimed to have gotten their training and received their training
were the
from.
serial killers that confessed to like the 600 murders and knew where bodies were, which obviously they couldn't. Wow.
And we're
go
later,
there.
And it's so crazy because they're later, again, spared from execution by both the Bush brothers.
That's
right?
bizarre.
Yeah, so bizarre. And so
why
you'd
do
have.
they say they spared them? Oh, because they confessed to murder, something like that.
I don't
They
think
seem
I
like
ever
the kind
got
of guys that would pardon people. They're not like the nicest.
I don't think they ever made any sort of reactionary statement as to the reason
I
why.
find that very bizarre.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyways, but what's go to the military?
So yeah, Otis Toole, right? Again, he's the gay lover of Henry Lee Lucas, and it turns out they met at a Jacksonville soup kitchen apparently, and they developed this sexual relationship, and then had a cross-country killing spree. And so it turns out they're both caught up with law enforcement separately, strangely. But Toole in April '83, it was for arson in Jacksonville, I think he was originally. And then for 2 months later, Lucas for killing an 82-year-old woman. And so both of them tell the story that's almost identical, right? This story that they were members of a cannibalistic cult based in the Everglades called the Hand of Death. Now, there's a book that is very difficult to get your hands on. You know, it's one of those. It's Max Call's book called The Hand of Death. It's worth getting if you can get your hands on a copy. But he explains that basically Henry, he discusses and describes his indoctrination into this nationwide satanic cult. And he says that he was trained in the cult in a mobile paramilitary camp in the Florida Everglades in the fine art of killing, is what he says. Other training involved abduction and arson techniques. So you wonder why Otis Toole was already caught up in an arson in Jacksonville. It makes sense because apparently Henry said Otis was already a member, and he's who introduced him to the Hand of Death. So the first task he was given was the murder of one of the students of apparently a young black homosexual who betrayed his oath to the devil. That's what Henry Lee Lucas said. So he slits the man's throat in an initiatory murder, and this apparently the same exact evening they had a satanic ritual, and they performed the satanic ritual in which they cut out this dead man's heart, right? And his blood was drained, his body's dismembered, and all of the initiated members of the hand drank from the dead man's blood and ate pieces of his flesh.
Damn.
So
the Ripper cult was doing cannibalism. Don't they think the
Exactly.
Belgium cult? I think they had like the blood and
Yes.
skulls. So
and finders had jars of blood and piss
this
and
was
shit.
the Finders was tied directly to the CIA. They shut this operation
Exactly.
down, kidnap kids. They had manuals on how to kidnap kids,
Yeah.
kids in America
Insert
and
themselves
orphanages. But they
in-
literally were like watching taking babysitter ads. Like, isn't
Exactly.
that just terrifying?
It is terrifying.
A
yeah.
parent should be terrified.
Ted
seeing that.
Gunderson says they were legitimately an abduction arm of the CIA to
No,
abduct
it's
children.
very clear. They got caught with 6 abducted kids. It's
Yeah.
like they had all these manuals on how to abduct, and they cleared out a lot of their files before they got raided.
By the way, they were allegedly taking them down to a church in Mexico, right, for bright young kids. That was what they told them. In reality,
Taking
guess
back
who
to
is
abuse them.
fundamentally entrenched in Mexico at the time? The Hand of Death cult and Henry Lee Lucas.
Interesting. Well,
So I think this was a
these
part of the
cartels,
network.
They do some human sacrifices. there's some story I can't remember, it was a while ago, but it was legitimately like human sacrifices, not just to kill, like to these like demonic gods.
And the cartels have been in bed with the intelligence agencies for decades now.
Israel as well, the CIA. Like you think all this drugs coming through the U.S. without like.
Oh my God, no! There's
very
I
much
remember
involved with the CIA,
absolutely.
the mafia.
I remember watching. I think it was an Alex Gibney documentary like over 10 years ago or something. It was called Cartel Land. And there's footage in that documentary of you have members of the Mexican cartels cooking methamphetamine with CIA agents and then trafficking it across the border into the U.S.
So that was definitely happening. The CIA was like, wasn't I think I ran Contra was cocaine coming through, which Michael Aquino, one of these guys running these, he openly ran one of these satanic churches and was a high-level government official. Yeah, and wrote a book with a member of Turning Point. Yeah,
on the Turning Point advisory board or something. Yeah, it's fascinating.
That's bizarre.
Paul Vallely, who again, that's psyop warfare doctrine, which is insane. And I will say, you have the Cabazon Indian Reservation providing us with a great window into how Iran-Contra was being facilitated. There's so much more to Cabazon. I mean, apparently members of the Finders and low-level members of the Temple of Set, it was called the Order of the Trapezoid, were actually affiliated at the Cabazon Indian Reservation running. So there was a joint venture with the Whack and Hunt Security Company, and this was a major CIA operation where they were basically flying in Mexican nationals into the Cabazon Indian Reservation illegally to cook methamphetamine. Yeah. And so,
because they had better cooks. That makes sense. I grew up in those rural areas, Indian reservation stuff, and there's just so much meth out there.
And just to know that they're testing esoteric weapon systems, they claimed on the reservation.
Easy to kill the Indians and stuff because there's lots of them addicted to drugs, alcohol. There's tons of land. People just disappear up there all the time.
Right, and there were major there was a huge scandal exposing all of this, and that major prominent authorities in the area locally were involved in facilitating this kind of exploitation of the reservation. And for
it's an easy target to exploit because there's lots of poverty,
and it's for the concept of a domestic covert operation. And I think that's important for people to realize because again, I had mentioned I think once that so as vice president. Nixon, right? He basically calls up Howard Hughes and he says, hey, we need plausible deniability. Would you set up black sites domestically throughout the U.S. for the CIA to operate in? And so Howard Hughes effectively did this. Now,
Howard Hughes he was huge here in Vegas.
Exactly.
I live in Howard Hughes controlled neighborhoods.
Right. And I think Howard Hughes, again, is like almost an intelligence construct, like, America's first billionaire, I believe even. And you think so many of these personalities, even like an Elon Musk and a Peter Thiels of the world, right? You see, yes, they have sort of genealogical, I think there's something to the fact that clearly the aristocratic nature of their families and like the emerald mines in South Africa and things of that nature. But at the same time, I believe they were kind of given a set of keys. It's almost like when the LifeLog project ended and Facebook began the same day, and Zuckerberg was basically handed the keys by the CIA.
He wasn't some genius in college,
right? No,
and
it's
then Facebook was pushed so heavily, so quick. Remember on MySpace, and then it was just this push for Facebook instead.
And the whole concept was let's manufacture consent for the public to essentially run their own intelligence operation by giving us their most intimate details of their lives.
Thoughts, and now it's tracked across all platforms. Palantir puts it into lists. We have our kill scores.
It's crazy. And so anyway, I can go on tangents forever. I apologize for that. But the main point here is that basically you have this paramilitary satanic cult and this training compound that basically you have, again, this dismembered initiatory process, right, where they're actually eating the flesh and drinking the blood of this young black man, unfortunately. But the point being is that
lots of gay murderers, which is never talked about.
I know.
Lots of them. I think maybe the stigma, because it's almost like a lot of them are found in prison. They know they have questionable morals. They find them, they recruit them, and they put them to this. That's a pattern I noticed.
Right.
I was seeing strictly that pattern until I stumbled across the Ripper murders, which doesn't fit the pattern because they were killing women. But other than that, it was just all gay, gay, gay.
I know.
It was really interesting.
Same with Atlanta child murders. Young gay African American boys is basically who were being brutalized, and it was because they were turning. They were basically what do they call it? They were hustling, is what they claimed, and so
Easy
they would even like just do gay shit for old homosexuals to essentially make money, and they called it hustling, and they acted like it wasn't gay because they were making money. Yeah, I know, it's terrible. Yeah,
it's one of those things.
That's the level of poverty.
They want to kind of bury that. I think a lot of those kids were abused young too,
Absolutely.
and that causes people to come on and be abusers. These are
And also
conversations
drug
you're supposed
use.
to have drug use. Yeah.
And I think the men would, especially the predators, they'll introduce drugs to the equation very
You
quickly.
see this all the time.
Yeah.
You know, these cases. You know, when they're not straight out kidnapping them, they're finding other ways to exploit them. That Norman guy even had kids living in like dormitories where they were selling them out. So like. You buy them for a couple of days. Most people were buying them for sex, but it appears with strong evidence that if for the right price and the right person, he'd sell them out or he could kill them.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And this is like the Delta with the Delta Project and the Eyes Foundation. They don't even have Wikipedias, and there are these massive scale operations
It's
all
incredible,
across the whole
honestly.
country.
Oh, and I should say for anyone who would like one of the most, I think, credible introductions to that case specifically, and also some of those concepts, is a book that's really even not that long, but it starts very kind of in the deep end, right? Like basically it starts with the concept of snuff films in regard to these networks, but it's called Eye of the Chicken Hawk by Simon Dovey is the author. And it's a fascinating book, and it kind of very much does an extraordinary job bridging that gap of credibility.
It's just such crazy concept. Is good for things where you could look at like hard evidence because it seems unbelievable and there's so many pieces, but when you start connecting it,
it really becomes hard to deny. And so anyway, the final point on Hand of Death is essentially because it fits so perfectly
tied into the process
with and the Son of Sam as well. And so to me, I view it as
the same case, kind of.
Very much so. And I think just realizing the timing of all of these cases as well.
Yeah, what are the years of these?
So this is all happening throughout the late 70s or early 80s, right? And so
these serial killers just blew up.
Yeah, exactly. It was basically, mid to late 70s.
They just came out of nowhere and just blew up. 70s to 90s, 20-year period.
Yep.
There was a little before, a little after, but there was a 20-year period where they just
blew up. And caused the Satanic Panic, which obviously they attempted to wield as like
just
this.
A panic, guys.
Exactly. And they tried to, I believe, exploit that in a real way to attempt to, diminish the reality of, actual satanic ritual abuse. Agree. Yes. And to allow it to continue unabated as well. And I think that's one of the biggest points is that was almost a perfect thought experiment, pejorative, like the conspiracy theorists or the Pizzagate, moniker. It's like this is how you disseminate the discrediting nature of these concepts.
We talked about real quick yesterday with Pizzagate, what they did. There's this crazy, massive, we have emails, all kinds of evidence they have. But then they mentioned this pizza place potentially where stuff was going on. And there was a lot of weird shit at that pizza place, by the way. So they sent a gunman in there to shoot the hard drive. And then they wiped it off the internet. You couldn't talk about Pizzagate. It was harmful. There was nothing there. These were just these good, innocent people, bro. I think
it was
there's so much to Pizzagate. Oh, yeah.
And
that's a whole separate
Exactly. And I think there was a network of proprietary fronts in that same area, right across the street, down the block. Best the Pizza, you look up Best the Pizza right next to Comet Ping Pong. It has the Little Boy Lover logo.
Jesus. And pizza is a code word.
Yes, they've rebranded
Voodoo Donuts. And I used to go to Portland, and then I realized it had the pedophile sign on there.
Oh, my God.
I was like, oh, my God. Then I looked it up, and apparently there were some allegations and
there
stuff.
You go.
I think they took it off after that. But I was just like, oh, my God.
One of the leading prominent officials, I believe.
They know. We wouldn't have known, but they know what these signs are.
Exactly.
For some reason, they are obsessed with sharing film, sharing things.
I know. And when it boils down to it, and again, I think they're probably trying to at least rebrand a little bit. I would have to imagine that they're being forced to
find new. Exactly. I'm sure they're coming with new, because everyone knows pizza now and that one sign. So I'm sure they're coming up with new terms.
New coded language.
They're not stupid.
Yeah.
But it is so weird. They're so obsessed with people have to see what they do.
I know.
And I don't know why, but that there is obsession from the high levels to the Jeffrey Epsteins to these low level killers. They want these networks to share it with.
I know. And honestly, when you have, and really I think, and again, this is to imagine these domestic black sites where they're training serial killers on how to, obviously perfect their craft, but beyond that, how to engage in abductions, like I was saying, and kidnappings and arson, then you start to wonder, okay, why did that evidence warehouse, for the FBI basically burn down with all the Anthony Weiner laptop evidence and more Epstein evidence as well? Absolutely. And you wonder, it's just, again, and I mentioned Omar Mateen and that crazy connection to, Michael Sanford, who grabbed a service revolver at that casino, right, and tried to.
That was here in Vegas.
Yeah, claimed he was gonna attempt to assassinate Donald Trump. Well, it turns out James Wesley Howell, and this guy Omar Mateen, and also this guy named Micah Xavier Howard, I believe was his name. Might have been Johnson, but I think it was Howard. And he shot multiple cops at Dallas Black Lives Matter event. Yeah. And so you have all these separate individuals across the domestic U.S. claiming through James Wesley Howell that they were all actually trained at a domestic compound, a black site. Yeah. And James Wesley Howell said he knew Omar and he knew Michael J. Sanford, who was the individual who tried to assassinate Trump. And he tells very detailed story as to how he actually even saw Hillary Clinton and Uma Abedin at the black site specifically. Who knows the credibility of that?
But it's just because there are other allegations of them. And again, I haven't gone deep into them, but there's a third. Well, how many kids were kidnapped?
33 from Haiti.
It really 33?
It was 33.
I didn't even realize the number was 33 till right
Me
now.
neither.
Oh my God.
I didn't realize it for the longest time.
It was, huh? 33. Because Clinton Foundation got caught. Girl was kidnapping 33 children from Haiti. And didn't you say Bill Clinton so helped get her out?
Bill Clinton flies to Haiti and gets Laura Silsby out of prison. She comes back to the domestic U.S. and is placed on the leadership of the Amber Alert system, which reports missing children.
So she would know.
Yes.
So she got caught kidnapping.
I mean, what do you do with
children,
that?
And you put her in charge of like the children.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like how the Brima Abramovich, the witch, how they asked for her by name in Ukraine to be in charge of like children's programs.
Exactly.
Like, so you're putting a satanic witch in charge of like orphanages is just sick.
And you wonder why Ukraine, during this unfortunate tragic conflict,
traffic kids,
has become the capital of human trafficking, basically. And that's it's natural in the concept of a failed state. But when the failed state is basically engineered, by the just as far as like the imperial war machine, I guess you could say, right?
Yeah.
It's a little difficult. It
seems like these groups you're talking about, they're obsessed with abusing kids, but a lot of them really like white kids for whatever reason. Yeah. And it got harder to kidnap kids in America. Like we said earlier, I think we talked about in this episode, we had a few conversations at the Finders Quote, how they had material on how to kidnap children.
Exactly. And if you remember as well, the owner of... Who was that owner of the hotels, that major hotelier that was in the Epstein files that basically claimed it was fascinating because he essentially claimed he was flying to Afghanistan during the Afghan conflict, right, to basically be provided by General Petraeus these Black Hawk helicopters to go play with Afghan boys with toys. And this is in the Epstein files. And then you have the same connection to Ukraine as well coming up in the Epstein files in terms
These
of...
are like the most powerful people in the world.
Exactly.
The people that they won't release the files because, as they say, our government would collapse if they did.
Right.
So these are people above the president, not that he's probably part of it, doing this evil shit.
And it's only natural you would think.
People are like, well, how could this be happening at the low level? Well, if you literally had people running the government doing this shit.
Right. And I think it's kind of only natural at this point to realize and accept the fact that in these war-torn, destabilized areas, they're going to exploit
they can just snack
that.
up children. Yeah.
Exactly. They're going to fully exploit that as much as possible for the overall scope of the enterprise.
Well, back to the Finders Quote, they literally had material on orphanages and how to procure kids from them. Like Woody Allen and his wife were talking about like orphanages, sending money to them. And then what was that one that I always thought was retarded? There was that furniture company.
Oh, Wayfair.
Wayfair. They were tracking Wayfair packages. And like
real.
Epstein himself was a billionaire is not going to call to track a package of a present he sent. And that's like cheap furniture to Woody Allen. And Woody Allen both had called to check on the Wayfair package.
Right.
That was, you can find this stuff in the emails. These are emails, not speculation.
Rachel Chandler, the child handler as well. Because she was actually in charge of, I believe, his product management for Wayfair at that very same time. She was personally involved with Diddy, with Epstein.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I was trying
photographed with Clinton as a young girl.
Who was running Wayfair? I didn't find that much. Well, let's talk about this after. That's a separate thing.
Right.
It seemed just so crazy, the Wayfair thing. Last thing, it just seemed so insane. But then when I put that in the Epstein files, I was like, what the fuck?
Right.
Especially, I know some billionaires. They don't call to check on furniture. Their assistants do that. They themselves were emailing about this package from Wayfair that they were tracking.
That's so ridiculous.
Like go look those emails up on there.
And
those ones really hit me. It's like, what? And then his wife talking about orphanages with his wife was constantly talking to Jeffrey Epstein. Typically, I'm not talking to my friends' wives.
Yeah, no kidding.
There's a couple of my friends' wives I'm kind of friends with. I'm not like having these long, constant email conversations about orphanages and
no, and I think really it's just, to me.
Well, his wife, he started abusing her as a young child.
Right.
It was like his stepdaughter, I believe. That's just sick right there.
No, it is. And honestly, it's Epstein is just, essentially you could, I feel like the Epstein files will be untapped for far too long. There's just so much more evidence in there. Yeah,
they say,
I know.
Well, they say they released half the file, but they say it was like only like 2% of the data, meaning it's videos and
right.
As he said, this could cause the government to collapse.
Yeah.
Let this shit fucking collapse then if it's that horrific.
Yeah, exactly. I think
and it probably does tie. Maybe these files go back into some of this stuff we're talking about.
Yeah, honestly, it's overlapping, no doubt, especially knowing that Southern Air Transport, the very airline that was a CIA cutout, was used by Les Wexner and Epstein, but also used by the Finders Cult and Marion Petty.
Oh, my God.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just crazy, all these cult government connections.
Yeah, and by the way, Marion Petty's son, he was in he was in David Ferry's Civil Air Patrol, the same Civil Air Patrol, which David Ferry is a mind control operative that was heavily involved in. And he's also a homosexual mind control with I believe he sexually molested Lee Harvey Oswald in his Civil Air Patrol unit as a cadet when he was a young teenager.
These cadet programs, that's what they were using.
Yeah.
They have these programs that they're just like, it's so crazy how they make it seem like these good, outstanding programs, but they're designed to procure children.
Exactly.
Who else? There's hard evidence of the one we just did on the Norman and stuff of this all being real.
You know who else was in the Civil Air Patrol with the same that Lee Harvey Oswald was in was Barry Seal would later be in that very same Civil Air Patrol unit, which is hilarious. Just as far as he's a teenager and he's apparently in a covert operation running as a pilot flying Agent Orange over Vietnam, right? And it's like knowing that they're bathing the countryside in this chemical warfare, and it's like
in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And I was out in Vietnam, bro. It's so beautiful. Like we fought this war for what? It seems like it's thriving, flourishing.
Mm-hmm.
So we fought a war, tens of thousands of Americans. I don't know, maybe 1 million Vietnamese died. Right. We lost the war, but the war machine got paid.
Exactly.
Thanks for watching Fight Back Podcast. If you like the show, like, subscribe, or share the video. There's also donation links in the descriptions. Hey everyone, I want to tell you about my sponsor, AntelopeHillPublishing.com. They're a free speech company that publishes books which would otherwise be censored, such as Culture of Critique by Kevin McDonald, who I've interviewed on my show. They have lots of collections of speeches and writings by important 20th century political figures that are censored in almost all other places. Check them out at AntelopeHillPublishing.com and use promo code FIGHTBACK. You will receive a discount and also support my podcast. Thanks very much.
No, it's honestly, it's always a tragedy, but anyway.
Yeah, I think we're almost an hour in, so let's get You're probably know too much.
Yeah, I know. That is, it's always the problem. But honestly, I'll try and stay focused now for just...
we're filming a couple things after this. Why? Otherwise, we could go for like 3 hours, but we have a few other things. Let's hit the Son of Sam and the direct ties to Process Church, which it is tied to everything we've been talking about for the last while. But
no, there's no doubt.
Because it is all interconnected. It's just like hard understanding that until you start getting a few of these cases and really hitting them in.
Right.
And I recommend people do take some of these cases individually if they want to look at this up and break them down individually one at a time. Spend a few hours on each one.
Yeah,
or a few days or a week or
it'll take time for sure if you want to get like a fundamental kind of framework of how it works.
To look at this because I got sucked in for the last week into that one we did, and it's just I still don't fully understand it. Obviously, you could understand because you got sucked into that one too, and that one's dark.
It is. It's just one of the darkest things I've ever covered.
Hard evidence in that one, in my opinion.
Absolutely, but there were hundreds, apparently several hundred students at this Hand of Death training compound, right? And this is coming from 6 different countries. Over half of them were women, allegedly.
Really?
Which I thought was a strange concept.
Epstein had lots of women procurers.
They said basically women were more effectively targetable for mind control for some strange reason.
More emotional.
That makes sense.
They had to adapt to environments more. and they could go get men easier.
Exactly.
To come back to them, your
The
guards down.
MKUltra
Some dudes
sex
invite
kitten
me to their
concept.
home. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. A
Yeah.
girl invite me over. You're like,
And
when
we
I was
were-
younger, we're dumb. We're like, sure.
Right. And honestly, you think of like there was the church committee hearings, which they said obviously MKUltra was driven underground into cult organizations after that. Well, it turns out Frank Church, right, was apparently there was a sinister CIA sub-project in the early 50s in regard to using creating child prostitutes to use as human honeypots. And this came in the
So
form.
it's that blackmail aspect. No,
Yes.
there's multiple aspects to it, but there were 100%, and there's convictions and stuff of this, of these massive child prostitution rings, and blackmail operations. Roy Cohen, Trump's mentor, was heavily involved with them.
Exactly.
So this shit's 100% true.
It is. And if you imagine that the face of disclosure and transparency at that time, Frank Church, for the church committee hearings, was allegedly sexually blackmailed by a child prostitute in this operation named Claudia Mullen. And this is real. She testified to this in the 90s about this all happening to her, in the late 50s, or in the 70s, I believe it was. And so anyway, I just knowing that this sinister CIA sub-project was considered as early as the early 50s.
Yeah.
And they kind of were grappling with this.
J. Edgar Hoover was blackmailed doing a gay sexual act. That's how, like, Meyer Lansky, the Jewish mafia, partially kept. I mean, they probably worked together too, but I think he partially could control him that way. That's why he never went to jail. Why the Italian mafia got broken up.
Exactly.
RICO Act was used to break up that mafia, but not the other.
That's so ridiculous. And so Claudia Mullen and Carol Rutz were two of these individuals who testified on the record claiming they were used in this operation, the sinister CIA sub-project, using child prostitutes as human honeypots. And that basically they were even trained on a black-sided compound in the remote Deer Creek cabins location, allegedly, with over 60 other, I believe, actual children who were brought to that location. So for that specific purpose of training them.
Get them young too, because then you can fracture their minds easier, keep them controlled.
Yeah,
it's dark stuff, but it's
just
the reality of what the research shows.
And I just think, again, I kind of laid out the concept of this domestic CIA black site network that was definitely geographically being represented within the U.S. itself, and not for various reasons for these clandestine operations, for obviously those child prostitutes, for apparently these serial killers and abductions and arsonists and things of that nature.
Like most were used for sex occasionally. Like even the guy that got busted, he had his, thousands of cards, but some had kill listed across them.
Right.
The ones that they happened to destroy.
Exactly. And man, when it comes down to it, there was Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole claimed that they had met a man that called himself, I believe Don Materic was his name, and he invited them to go to Miami and do contract killings for the Hand of Death.
Damn. And
Materic and Toole eventually admitted to Henry Lee Lucas that Otis Toole was already working for Don Materic and the Hand of Death for years by this point. And so this is basically, when people need to realize that, you have several hundred students at this Hand of Death training camp coming from 6 different countries. I mean, the concept of this alone is something worth, considering as a possibility of how so many of these high-profile criminal cases come to fruition, and it makes so much more sense. These aren't isolated incidents.
So many patterns the same, evidence being covered up, like so many serial killers escaping prison twice, like Ted Bundy, stuff disappearing, evidence constantly. There just seems like there was so many of these cases. Seems like there was being blocked.
Exactly, and that's why I think knowing that the Bush family actually saved and set aside the death sentences for Otis Toole and
that's bizarre.
Henry Lee Lucas,
they're not the kind of guys that are known to go. They're the kind of guys that push the death penalty.
Yeah, and Henry claimed that like the leaders of the training compound and the Hand of Death camp were basically so impressed with the way he could handle a knife that they allowed him to even serve as an instructor for a time. And so Henry claimed that he served the cult and this included as a contract killer, as an abductor of children, who he delivered to a ranch in Mexico near Juarez. He said that on the record. So 3 days before Lucas was scheduled to be executed, Governor George W. Bush at the time, he's infamous again for refusing to grant stays of execution.
Kidnaps, kills, tortures kids. Yeah, this guy deserves to live.
Right, and he had never done this before or since George W. Bush. And he saved Henry Lee Lucas from the electric chair and commuted his sentence to life in prison instead. So
he felt like the guy deserved to live this evil. Yeah, fry that motherfucker.
Yeah, exactly. And when you think of the leniency to choose leniency for this
guy,
person,
like one of the worst possible people you could imagine.
And as I mentioned before, he sends a great grandmother, it was, who killed her abusive husband in self-defense. He allows her to be executed,
but not this guy.
But not this guy. And so I think, and then I believe Otis Toole as well, like I mentioned. He's convicted in the state of Florida, shared the exact same fate with Henry, obviously having his death sentence commuted. Florida, of course, seems to have been, I believe, in Program to Kill. Dave McGowan said they're very
one of the top places to kill people.
Exactly,
yeah.
overzealous, right?
Patterns of places where people are getting killed.
Yeah, overzealous,
like the Seattle area, California.
Right, but apparently not enough to execute the likes of Otis Toole, obviously, and that's why you have. Both of these men in their death sentences, having them being set aside in states ran by members of the Bush family is basically the concept. So, and again, that was the Bush brother in Florida at the time, right?
Yeah, and you see these families, as you do the research, do over and over, the same families passing things down, which makes sense.
Right. So I think, obviously I lingered and we went far too and off into different directions and things of that nature for a brief moment, but I still felt as if it was important to illustrate
this is tied into this
kind of just how oversaturated the domestic U.S. is with these geographical representations of these hotspots of intelligence.
What is this? The Church of the Process? I say, like, what exactly is it? There's multi-chapters.
So the Process Church of the Final Judgment is basically. It was conceived in London, England, right? It was like, I think in the 63.
It goes across different countries. This makes sense.
Right. And this is, I believe, it was in 63. So it was the same year that JFK was assassinated. And you have two high-ranking members of the Church of Scientology that split with the parent organization.
Scientology connections.
Right? And they followed, basically, this was allegedly some sort of philosophical dispute, right? Differences they had.
Satan and Church of Set split.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, which again to me feels like a splintering off for a strategigic reason.
Yeah, exactly. I was kind of thinking the same thing.
Mm-hmm. In reality, I don't think there was really any sort of actual falling out. I think it was okay. We need to actually spread our tentacles.
The Satanism through Hollywood, the commercial Satanism. I'll take the kids and sacrifice them.
Exactly. And it's I think they did have project managers that were kind of their expertise lied in different areas, right?
There's several characters that pop up over and over. We start studying this stuff.
Honestly,
Mike Aquino probably being like the
absolutely
top dog, at least maybe that I've noticed. There's probably someone above him. Jolly West, like
right. So
several characters you see over and over.
And when you have basically this falling out with L. Ron Hubbard because they were personal, like, again, Robert de Grimston and his wife, Marianne McLean de Grimston. They both, I believe his name was Robert Moore to begin with. That was the original name. But they had received, like, advanced training at the Hubbard Institute of Scientology in London's, like, I forget, it's a high-profile area.
Is that where
like,
Scientology came out of London? Or?
I mean,
I need to do some research into Scientology because I haven't gone on that, but seeing connections to these guys, the
L. Ron Hubbard.
The other guy, what's the guy? I can't remember his name. The guy that talked to the Egyptian gods.
Temple of Set, Michael Aquino.
No, the other one talked to the Egyptian gods in England. 33rd degree Mason. He's really popular. I don't know, I'm having a brain freeze right now, but he was like 33rd degree Mason. He wrote all these books. They called him like the evilist. What's his name? Because not Jack Parsons. He trained Jack Parsons. God damn it. It's driving me crazy.
Damn it. Yeah, I can't believe I can't remember either. But
anyways, that guy, he's out of there too, tied into Scientology. The same people, same beliefs.
And I wonder, because I honestly, as much as I love the concept of, sort of the foundation of America, I believe was really almost this, I think it was a cartoonish concept.
All these 33rd degree Masons involved with it. I just feels like I've always avoided looking into the Freemasons. And you start going down a rabbit hole and you're like, God damn it, there's something here too.
Right. And I think it was more in line of a Rosicrucian mission, a city upon a hill, the New Age Atlantis, the cultivation of this. It's definitely, I feel like the foundation of America is almost integrated and entrenched in occult ideology. And
Well, DC's built on occult, aligned with the stars, all the Masons. And again, I don't have it figured out, but I saw there was a lot more bizarreness to the beginning than I realized.
It's difficult to dismiss after you begin to realize, the overlapping sinister nature of the occult layers and symbols involved with.
Literally, DC is laid out in occult.
It is. And when you see, so basically, they separated from, what's so crazy is they separate from Scientology and they have this falling out with L. Ron Hubbard. And then they adopted this cult name of de Grimston for themselves, this couple, Robert Moore and Marianne McLean. And so this is when I believe you have, and it's so fascinating when you realize that Robert Moore de Grimston was actually born, his birthday happened to be the exact same day that David Berkowitz would be coincidentally arrested, which I thought was interesting, right?
Because on his birthday.
Yeah, it just felt like, who knows what that means, but at the same
time, it could be
coincidence,
or it could very be likely something that they're connecting.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think, and there's so much to like understanding how they structured the cult in itself.
They're
I
very
think
into these numbers and stuff, the numerology.
They are.
Like when I saw 33 missing children, 33 victims of Gacy, he was the clown for the 33 ice creams. Like just over and over, you see number 33. Once you guys start looking, you'll start seeing it.
Oh,
666, people know that one, obviously.
Yeah, and it really is. I think we were talking, Sam Tripoli and Brad, on whatever this is, our show we were discussing the other day about basically the 33 demon, which if you look up the 33 demon, I think it's kind of like almost the concept of revelation of the method, right? Where it's like you don't even, honestly, it's a fascinating concept, and it's something I would just encourage people to go look this up, because you begin to wonder, like, how much are people actively participating and aware of the fact that they are layering in this symbolic references, in terms of revelation of the method and culture creation and this kind of idea of, ritualistically layering in that symbolic reference.
It's all in our films, but then you look at almost every, if not every Hollywood theater, or like the MGM, all these Warner Bros., all 33rd degree Masons,
right?
And Jewish.
It's just
the music industry, all the symbolisms everywhere. Once you start looking, you're like, oh my God, this stuff's everywhere.
Right. But what's so crazy is that right after the de Grimstons developed the Process Church, they were essentially running these experiments on sophisticated mind control games, right? Is basically what they were doing.
It's like MKUltra.
Exactly. And so when you have that just, being conducted, and basically I think they had a center to study what they termed compulsion analysis for research into elimination of compulsive behavior. They had so many different weird doctrines of like free choice. They were talking about declaring that individuals were completely responsible for their own fates, actions, and afflictions. And basically they would go into, I think the concept of it, right, is the de Grimstons believed in reincarnation. The gods they worshipped were Jehovah and Lucifer. And so basically this is what I thought was interesting as far as the philosophy of it. Robert de Grimston published a book in 1967, I believe it was. And it was called As It Is, I think was the name. And he says, so this spelled out the process's philosophy is essentially what he was doing, right? And he says, this is a quote of Robert de Grimston in his book. He says, Christ said, love thine enemy. Christ's enemy was Satan, and Satan's enemy was Christ. Through love, saint and sinner destroy the enmity between them. Through love, Christ and Satan have destroyed their enmity and come together for the end. Christ to judge, Satan to execute the judgment. The key to this treatise is contained in the sentence which says that Christ and Satan have joined forces to bring about the end of the world.
Damn.
Christ, according to the process, was employing Satan as a hitman. So worshiping Satan was akin to worshiping Christ.
Wow.
And killing in the name of Satan was actually killing for Christ,
That's
a divine mission. Like, imagine.
Crazy, the justification. No, look at none of these cults pretend to be evil. They all like, oh, it's God's duality and all this.
Yeah,
this
and
is very similar to that.
Jehovah and Satan, and
bring
Lucifer,
back the
right?
Antichrist, which is the Freemasons. They want to bring back the third temple. It's a little separate, but that's bringing back the Antichrist.
Exactly. So I thought you'd appreciate that concept of the philosophy of the process, because clearly that's obviously they're kind of justifying what's to come.
It so much matches some of these other cults I've been looking to of like they try not to make their goddess out to be evil, but yet they're sacrificing children to it.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't call it good either. It's like a duality. That's kind of what you just said, the duality of Jesus and Satan. That's, don't want to go back to the trope, but that's what that day, church, it was a duality of God they worshipped.
Exactly. And it's just like, and again, this is, to me, the cult was arranged in subgroups. Apparently it was like 3 subgroups.
Yes, you can compartmentalize it. So you only need a few people at the top. People seem this like it's impossible to do.
Right.
But what you would do is you have a few masterminds behind it, and they take these little cults. They could recruit guys from like prison or abuse this young. They know people with shady character, and then they set them off in these different groups. They don't all know about each other. I mean, I'm theorizing, but that's how you do something like this.
Absolutely. And it's also, I believe, they represented, the subgroups represented 3 separate gods, which I thought was interesting in their concept. And so you have the Jehovah's, who are allegedly straight-laced and uncompromising, the Puritans of the sect. Then you have the Luciferians, and in contrast, they're apparently they literally embraced each other physically, like, advocating sensuality, tranquility, and the free use of narcotics. And then finally, you have the Satanists, who specifically believed what Satanists basically gore, violence, sacrifice, devil worship.
So those are the ones that did the evil stuff.
So new process members were free to select the discipline of their choice, but this option basically, it was up to the De Grimstons in the early stages. According to their preachings, all 3 branches would converge. Well, all 3 branches would allegedly converge for the final judgment, which would mark the end of the world as non-members. The, quote, gray forces of moderation, which is, again, the processins are fascinating in regard to what they allegedly practiced and believed. But no matter which god they apparently bowed to, it wouldn't matter in the
Freemasons.
end.
It doesn't matter what god you believe in. You can't be an atheist. You have to believe in a god, higher power. You could believe in Lucifer. You can believe in Thor,
right?
Whatever. You have to believe in a god. That's the rules. You have to believe in the supernatural forces.
That makes sense. And when you have like this strange Christ-Satan duality playing out in the philosophy,
I've seen that they call it a god of duality, and these clearly evil things. You just perfectly explained it right there. How they look at it. Yeah. It's a different cult. They use slightly different wording, but it's like identical to like.
And they're trying to blend it together to justify this legitimate just sinister.
Because like they'll be like, oh, you have to have evil too.
Yeah, and they
argument.
act again.
They make it like very like it's justified and needed.
As if ritual murder is a divine mission.
Yeah.
It will bring about the end of the world, the final judgment.
Probably by giving people drugs, they take people with shady characters anyways, and spin it like it's a needed.
Yeah.
It would make sense if they're acting priest-like, God-like. That's how this mind control works. Like, not the man's not God-like, but he's a charismatic figure. He could speak to stuff, get people on drugs.
Have you seen the actual symbol of the processed church? Oh, shit, I just did that. Oh, no, that's...
Like,
I didn't mean
some
to
people
do
are going to catch that and be like, oh, Austin's
Illuminati confirmed, dude.
Church.
Look up the processed church of the final judgment, because they have their symbol itself is basically it looks like a distorted swastika, right?
Oh, wow.
Which I thought was interesting.
Like swastika.
Right.
That's interesting. And that's been used in other cults.
Mm-hmm.
Remember Kanye got deleted because he posted the one of
my God. Yeah.
And a Jew started that cult. That's
right. And so that's
an old ancient symbol.
They were all wearing like these black capes and the Mendez goat of Satan stitched in red on the back. And they also, keep in mind, I think the red robes would be worn, and I've at least initiates have explained that I've read in the past that red robes are worn during ritualistic blood sacrifice ceremonies. So it's kind of like a different setting for a different garb for the wardrobe necessary for the ritual.
All these kids in these abuse cases always explain these robes.
Mm-hmm.
We're not getting the details, but the details are identical and they are dark.
Exactly. And so, it's just, again, I think almost just knowing that they had the process had a magazine, right? And basically they had like a winged skeleton suspended over a pile of naked bodies on the cover.
Skeleton again.
Yeah. They had humans' mouths gaping, apparently were either dead or in hell or both. And you had the inner pages of the process, basically the process. Now, clearly, the official process symbol, like I mentioned, is an inverted swastika, but you also have to keep in mind that basically this literature in the form of the Process magazine. If you're looking at it, and they're basically kind of necrophilia is being promoted in a way, right? Which again, it's like cannibalism. We just talked about the hand of death, right? I mean, they're drinking the blood, they're eating pieces of the flesh after a death ritual is engaged in.
It's been on all throughout history, by the way, too. That's not like new.
No, it's not. I mean, the Carthaginians, if you remember, obviously, I mean, they had a culture surrounded around child sacrifice, and this is
that's been common in a lot of cultures. The Aztecs.
Yeah, I mean, what was the obsidian knife and the ancient pyramids in Mesoamerica, right, where they're legitimately carving out the hearts of live individuals
exactly.
In a solstice.
Aleister Crowley is the name I was trying to come up with earlier, by the way. I was reading through the Process Church, and then I see that name because he was like directly.
Oh yeah, I can't believe that I forgot.
I know. I was retarded. I'm like, why can't I think of him? I knew you knew who I was talking about. I just wasn't explaining it right.
That's
why I'm like, I'll just move on. Aleister Crowley, he's like involved with all this stuff too. It's all. It's like a giant worldwide interconnected.
It is.
It just seems too ways to be true, but when you start seeing all the same people connected to them.
So it was like the spring of 1968, right? And you have the Process. They're essentially distributing their magazine at the time. And it was the sex issue of the Process magazine specifically in the spring of 68. And it's the front cover displayed a photo of a satanic ceremony. It was a naked woman lying on an altar surrounded by a band of hooded cultists, and an inverted cross shadowed the scene. And that was the cover of this sex issue of the Process magazine.
You just don't understand art.
Yeah, I guess I don't, man. But it's
like the Marina Abramovich, the stuff they try to call art. It's just like
spirit cooking. Yeah, I mean, my God, it couldn't be more overtly, a glorifying cannibalism and legitimate torture. It's ritual torture. But I think when you see that basically in the literature of this Process magazine issue, they had essentially articles relating to black masses and necrophilia. Yeah. They had, and again, we've been talking about pedophile publications, yesterday, unfortunately.
And this stuff was like well documented in all these magazines, Advocate Magazine. Just the scale of this is just insane. I can't believe I've never heard of that story that we covered. It's just like...
I know. And just to see the practice of performing sexual or other violations on corpses, that's the part of the necrophilia being promoted in this issue of the Process magazine. So then you have another issue devoted to fear. This was the fear version of the magazine.
Fear.
On the back cover of this publication, there's a band of marching Nazis spewed from the mouth of a fiery pink skull. It's just symbolism there. Yeah, exactly. And then you have the Nazis that were in this back cover piece were tramping on a group of people being consumed by fire. So it's all symbolism. But now you also have an illustration of the face of Hitler appearing in a funhouse mirror and a human being shown burning to death at the same time, right? So they're trying to...
shocking imagery.
Exactly.
They're trying to push boundaries to find people.
Right. Now, this is when you have the issue, the Process would release. It was the death issue, which was the magazine's center spread devoted to the unholy alliance of the Lamb of God and the goat of Satan. So you see, the blending together of this duality of right?
I've seen that in all these different cults, this duality thing. That's why it takes a lot of research to start understanding these, but this duality is over and over. Well, Aleister Crowley, sex magic. That was the abuse of kids. It was like a magic they would gain through the sexual abuse.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I think. It's
directly tied to this cult,
right? And I believe that so many different cult initiates believe in that practice and do fundamentally engage in it. And I think
it probably is a little magic in sex, but
it
unfortunately they're using a dark angle.
Exactly, and just knowing that the caption in that death issue, it read, "The lamb and the goat must come together. Pure love descended from the pinnacle of heaven, united with pure hatred raised from the depths of hell." I mean, this is the mentality of the philosophy behind it.
That's how they're justifying it.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, I think, and by the way, Sirhan, right? So you have
he's the guy who executed RFK Sr.
Right. So it turns out, I think it was author.
That was clearly a fake. I've done some. I had Ryan Dawson come break that down. That is the most obviously cover up it's just insane how ridiculous that story is, by the way.
It is. And I think, I mean, for
There's
him,
no way Sirhan acted alone if he acted at all, you know.
I mean, he was hypnotized throughout the course of the trial, right? And there's one. It's so sad. You watch the video of him. He's basically. I mean, it's audio, you know, of him being hypnotized. And but talk about leading the witness. I believe it was the prosecution who led him through this. And they said, Sirhan, you're grabbing the gun, Sirhan. You know, he's like fully in a hypnotic trance, and they're trying to act as if, you know, you're going through it. You're killing RFK.
I think he was like a low-level mobster, I think, too, and they kind of...
He was definitely...
He had multiple things involved.
He worked at that horse race track, and that was affiliated with the mob, and it turns out that essentially he was drawn up, and they had been programming him officially for taking him to the shooting range. This is why Sirhan claimed that... and there was an expert hypnotist that wasn't a part of the prosecution that also hypnotized Sirhan during the course of the trial. And he said he was one of the most suggestible minds that he had ever come across, which he said implicated directly that he had been hypnotized hundreds of times in the past. Yeah. And so knowing that, then he basically programmed Sirhan to perform a monkey routine in the jail. And so in the jail cell, he says,
show like how acceptable he is.
Yes, how suggestible he is. So he says, okay, Sirhan, as soon as I give you the trigger word, you're going to jump on the top of the bars and perform a monkey routine, you know? And so, boom, Sirhan jumps on the top of the bars, performs a monkey routine, comes back down, triggered out of the trance, and you have the expert hypnotist ask him if he recalled any of it, and he had no memory whatsoever.
Well, obviously someone else was also involved in the murder. We're not going to get into that real quick, but look this case up. I did one with Ryan Dawson on this. He broke it down so good. It's clearly fake. And the funny part, not funny, the fucked up part is he was Palestinian. They put a little newspaper on him of the conflict. So they'd be like, oh, he did it for that. It's like, give me a break.
Right. And I believe I know exactly who and what's fascinating.
They know who did it, right? I can't remember the details. But there was a guy
Cesar,
the bullets all came from like, there was more bullets. The case is just so ridiculous. That
he worked in a cutout. It was basically an intelligence cutout. Provided by Howard Hughes, which is hilarious. So it's like just knowing that he was basically, it's a very interesting thing, Eugene Cesar, you know, and his role in that. But again, that's another tangent. I could break down
an hour and a half in. So we should knock out the important points of this because we're supposed to do more filming after this. So.
Exactly. So honestly, there is a very interesting connection to the process, Charles Manson and Sirhan, but that's for another time, you know. Okay. Yeah, exactly, really. And
so Sirhan was connected to the church. That's why he brought him up. I thought it was just the mind control. So he was connected directly to the church because I knew he was a low-level mobster. They kind of pinned it on. I said we don't need to get into it, but that definitely was not. That's 100%. I would say this case is a cover-up. Looking at evidence,
there's no
insane.
Doubt. There's no doubt
how blatant it was.
And when you realize that there's the individual responsible for incorporating the Process Church, his name was Tommy Baumler, right? And he's actually a Freemason expert hypnotist, a bishop of the American Orthodox Catholic Church, and son of veteran OSS officer working out of Guy Bannister's office, all right, which happened to be basically happened to found the phony intelligence front organization known as the Louisiana Psychoanalytical Association, right? And then just before he helped incorporate and even name the Process Church of the Final Judgment. That's who this was. It was an attorney named Tommy Baumler. And it turns out that Guy Bannister's office, obviously, you know, that's the 544 Camp Street in the JFK assassination. So during the JFK assassination, the investigation, Jim Garrison exposed 544 Camp Street as being this intersection of the Office of Naval Intelligence in this basically this.
I've done a little
cutout.
on JFK, but I don't know it that well, to be honest.
It's fascinating.
I know some of the really weird parts, so I don't even know the part you're talking about. That's how deep it is.
It's fascinating, and it turns out Guy Bannister was involved with Clay Shaw, and they were running Lee Harvey Oswald in a dangle. You know, basically this is when they set him up with. If you remember the Fair Play for Cuba Committee pamphlets that he was passing out in front of like key locations. Yeah, this is how
on communism.
This is how they staged that narrative was by actually positioning him in places where he would be. There would be pictures taken of him. You know, he would legitimately be exposed as a communist sympathizer through this. But what they didn't realize is that when he printed the pamphlets, he put the address of Guy Bannister's office, 544 Camp Street, so it exposed the intelligence operation. And so they got so upset that Oswald was passing out those pamphlets because it ultimately would lead back to them. And that's exactly what happened. So for the same individual, an attorney named Tommy Baumler, who's an expert hypnotist, and again, founded this ridiculous intelligence front known as the Louisiana Psychoanalytic Association, involved in mind control, and basically a traveling bishop. This is David Ferry. A lot of these people involved with the JFK assassination were. And then be the son of an OSS officer as well, like, you know, this sort of oligarchic, aristocratic nature of how this plays out, and a Freemason. He's the one who incorporated.
Once they started knows it's crazy because they swear an oath right away. They'll get their throat slit.
Yeah.
And there's been cases of Masons getting killed when they start speaking up.
Exactly. But for Tommy Baumler to share all of those qualities and then be the one who incorporated the Process Church of the Final Judgment and even helped give it its name, that's interesting. Right, and
it's
for that,
interesting how these people are all connected. Again, I don't want to get off, but Jack Ruby, he worked. His rent was being paid for the guy that had this child prosecution ring that was like killing the children. So you're like, oh my god, it shows you he was tied into the same. So it's all the same network. And, you know, there could be several different networks and layers over, but there's obviously this interconnected network going on.
So, for the sake of Son of Sam, David Berkowitz, I mean, he basically was known to the public as the 44 caliber killer. That was what he was known as, and he's widely, obviously considered now as the Son of Sam serial killer, but pled guilty to 8, I believe, perpetrating 8 shootings. It was between July 76 to July 77, so it was like a year and 3 days.
Okay.
Yeah, and it resulted in 6 total deaths and fatalities. And allegedly, officially, he would wield this 44, the official narrative, this 44 special caliber bulldog revolver, and he's supposed to have been responsible for killing these 6 people and wounding 7 others, terrorizing, you know, the state of New York at the time. They were basically overwhelmed with,
why do you think this one
fear.
got more attention than some of these other cases? It seemed like this got so pushed.
Yeah.
And some of these other serial killer cases have got buried.
I think it was the public nature of the letters to investigators and media representatives that happened.
Makes sense.
And I believe,
what was he writing in the letters? Just antagonizing them, or
it seemingly so, but I don't believe David Berkowitz ever wrote those letters, you know. And he actually did. I made a note that at one point, David Berkowitz basically he had left a note, right, where he implicates it in it was in his apartment. So he left a letter, Berkowitz did, in his apartment. A letter that was found and withheld by the police department, in which Berkowitz wrote a warning to the police agencies in the tri-state area, saying there was a cult that had as its goal the murder of 100 young men and women.
He wrote this before he was arrested, or after?
Just before he's arrested.
Just before he's arrested. Okay.
Left it in his apartment, and so I thought that was interesting. You know, just in terms of knowing that Maury Terry, when he would talk to him in 1997, David Berkowitz would go talk to Maury Terry. In this interview in Inside Edition, I believe, he implicates a well-established satanic cult as ordering these murders. 100 young men and women were demanded as the ultimate sacrifice, and members of the cult, he claimed, were accomplices. Berkowitz said he participated in all the 8 of the attacks, but that he only pulled the trigger in 3 out of 6 killings. Yeah. So that's important to know.
Well, that's kind of a weird lie, too, because you're still saying I'm a murderer, so it's not like you're trying to say you weren't involved.
Exactly, yeah.
Just like, you know, John Wayne Gacy, he admitted to being a psycho murderer, killing people, but he wasn't even in the state during 16 of them.
Yeah, which, again, goes to show what the point is here. And obviously you have the Carr family being involved, John Carr, and who David Berkowitz would mention these people as well.
And
I
they
think
were accomplices, right?
Yeah,
were they
I believe
the ones that were the sons of Sam? Because there was some people that had a dad
You know,
named
it's
Sam.
so interesting.
I've done very little research. I was trying to skim over this stuff to understand it.
It's very interesting because, you know, they claim, right, he got his instructions from a dog, you know.
Yeah, which is retarded.
Which, by the way, those German Shepherds were found in a mass grave in Untermyer Park.
Dude.
Blood rituals.
How far was that from where he lived?
Dude, it was right up the street from the Carr family. That's the problem.
This park seemed really dark.
It was.
They were doing all kinds of terrible things out there.
Yeah. Untermyer Park in its own right was like had Freemasonic symbolism involved. It had, you know, the Sphinx, the wing, you know, twin pillars. It had everything you could imagine. And you also have to keep in mind that Untermyer, basically like himself, the individual, like I believe his name was, I'll find his name, hold on. The group, so Berkowitz belonged to a group called the Children, right? I think Samuel J. Untermyer was the name of the guy.
of the Process Church.
Exactly.
It
was a
is
local
Process
chapter.
Church, but it's like a chapter.
It's a local
kind of like
chapter.
the Freemasons. Then you have the Masons, the Jester. I mean, they have tons of offshoots of it. So it's the same organization offshoot. Okay.
Right. And just so, like, and Samuel J. Untermyer was the name of the guy who actually originally created and founded the Untermyer Park, right? And basically created it.
So that could have been the Sam, or who knows what the Sam
Well,
mean. That could.
Son of Sam, I'll get into that because I think that actually comes from his mind control during his time in the Army. I think David Berkowitz was a mind control victim, unfortunately, as he was in the Army in the early 70s. But
These serial killers were in the Army. I noticed that pattern.
Mm-hmm. But just so you're aware, you have in Untermyer Park, right? Because, again, David Berkowitz belonged to this group known as the Children. They would meet at Untermyer Park in Yonkers, and this is where they would participate in black masses and ritual sacrifices. So you look at Untermyer, if you just pull up pictures of this park, sphinxes, Masonic twin pillars, like I said, built on occult principles. It's basically filled with symbolism related to elite secret societies. And so you have, Untermyer being built by Samuel J. Untermyer. And so this guy is an extremely prominent figure in U.S. history. He's basically deeply connected to the occult. Maury Terry himself, the author of The Ultimate Evil, he said that Untermyer was a member of the New York City Temple of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
Yeah.
Aleister Crowley, my friend.
Yeah, that's exactly. He was the leader of that, right?
Yeah, he was. And so he founded the Golden
when
Dawn.
You start seeing these Masonic ties, just how prominent and how much effort they put into this stuff.
Yeah.
I don't want to get off on tangents, but the Statue of Liberty, they've brought Egyptian sphinxes
is
to
the
New York.
Statue of Liberty actually a female? Because I'm not really quite certain that
After
it is.
looking into it, it seems like it actually might be Satan the Light Bearer.
Right.
I thought that was always some crazy thing until I actually looked and saw it was Freemason, 33 Freemason.
Satan Lucifer summoning his legions.
It matches that picture.
It matches, man. It's hard. It's hard
it
to.
has the uncut chain on its leg.
And you see
letting Lucifer
Marina
free.
Abramovich in front of that picture with
one of the Rothschilds.
Yeah.
It's like they're literally telling you it's Satan summoning his demons. There's this famous picture. One of the which Rothschild? Maybe it was Jacob Rothschild. One of the Rothschilds and Marina Abramovich, who's this witch, spirit cooking. They're standing in front of Satan. They're telling you Satan summoning his legions. And the Statue of Liberty almost matches. That's a whole separate offshoot, but it's crazy. It just shows you how seriously these Masons, though, they're the ones that funded it, brought it there on both sides. They've literally got like old fucking 4,000-year-old like obelisks from brought them over from Egypt, and they lined them up with the Orion's belt. The pyramids are lined with Orion's belt. I don't know what that means. I just know it shows. It shows they take this
loyalty
stuff seriously.
to some extent, and that they practice this ideology at the very least.
The amount of money and effort and time they put into this shows it's very serious to them. And the sphinxes, it's all the same symbology. I want to look at pictures of that park. What's it called?
Untermyer Park. It's
Hunter or
Untermyer.
With a U?
Yeah, with a U. And again, this is like in terms of the Golden Dawn affiliation with Samuel J. Untermyer, it's necessary to understand that's the reason why this site was probably chosen even for to be a sinister site of ritual sacrifice. So you have, again, I believe it was essentially the group, the Children that David Berkowitz was a part of, right? They're meeting in this, essentially in what's called the Devil's Cave. It's an abandoned building in Untermyer. And you have, this is where you have, again, the Children who are meeting in this abandoned building, and they called it the Devil's Cave. And it was in an interview in 1993 where Berkowitz described what happened in the Devil's Cave. And he said, we had a spot where there was like a circle with rocks. You could actually feel like a force out there, a presence out there in the darkness. We began to hear more and more conversations about witchcraft, about black magic. We were really having little religious services almost. I did begin to witness some animal sacrifices. We were at a park, I guess. It was Untermyer Park. We had this circle formed, and we said, okay, let's start chanting now. Let's call the names of the demons. Let's call Satan's name. Let's call Lucifer. Let's bring him. Let's summon from the netherworld, from the air, and let's ask him to anoint you, to knight you as one of his royal soldiers, to do his bidding, to do his will. So obviously, this is a reason why there were arsons all over the state of New York during this time as well. It was a massive issue. I found that to be interesting.
That was one of the things they wanted too.
So David Berkowitz says these demons wanted fire. That's what he said. So that's and then Hand of Death. We mentioned they were training them on how to become arsonists as well, not only abduct children and commit killings. So
interesting how it's all like tied together. How
it
it's
is,
always,
man.
like, whether the demons are real or not, they seem to be really trying to call these demons and
Yes.
summoning them. And that's why, like, things like Ouija boards and that shit, stay
Oh,
away from
man,
that
I
shit.
don't wanna
dude.
play
It's
with
like,
that.
Don't play with anything when you're
No,
like,
I
summoning
wouldn't do
shit.
that. I wouldn't do that. And honestly, when it comes down to it, I think it's important for people to realize that there is a mind control connection to David Berkowitz, right? And I think just realizing that I believe there were letters that quickly became the focal point, right? Again, because there were multiple letters that were written to the media.
It was the media. That's
Mhm.
why. That's why it blew up so big.
Exactly. So then you have this media attention being provided to this story directly, capturing, the public's attention. And so the satanic panic looming large,
They
right?
intentionally wanted to catch the attention with it. It seems like they were just
Exactly.
firing for tension.
Yeah.
But a lot of these cases seem like they're buried. This is the opposite. They're trying to pull as much attention to it.
Exactly, which to me is the equivalent of how much it's almost the ultimate sacrifice. You're considering the vast majority of the general public heightened emotional reaction
Yeah.
to this, providing a sense of energy to the ritual in itself.
You mentioned fear earlier in their literature, right? They wanted to pump the whole city full of fear.
Exactly. And so I really think that it was well designed in their attempt to effectively achieve that goal. And so the letters, I think ultimately you have the satanic panic, as I mentioned, looming large in the minds of the American public. So it's just no doubt playing a prominent role in terms of the public perception of this specific case. And then you have, I think it was, I'd shown you that recent documentary. I think it was from like 2021, just as like an intro to the concept of Son of Sam, because they basically used a lot of Maury Terry's work in terms of his book, The Ultimate Evil. And it was over
He's
40
done
years.
a lot of research on this, right?
Over
Yeah, he did
40
tons of
years.
research.
Yeah, he was attempting to kind of
He followed
prove
this whole cult, right? Like a
Yeah.
long time.
and so did a detective by the name of Detective James Rothstein as well. Did a lot of just pivotal work on this subject. But
they always try to bury these cases,
Mm-hmm.
lone actors, get it quick to trial, conviction. Don't bring any other.
yeah, we can't expose the wider network that's truly involved, because that would actually prove out the concept and reinforce the notion of there is a power cabal, unbridled behind the scenes, who are able to engage in the most sinister and
merge and get away with
sadistic.
it.
Yes,
And cover-ups, like that,
right.
making 100,000 files get deleted.
And instead of
Epstein files not be released.
Right.
That's why it's relevant today. These cases, your 70s, 80s and stuff, but you look right today, they won't. Courts ordered it, and they just say nope.
exactly.
After you ran out and released the files, and you're like,
I
oh
know.
no, you stupid goy can't see these files.
Right. And that's so I credit Maury Terry and these individuals of integrity who spent so much of their lives committed and
Dedicated like 40 years to
man.
researching it.
And
even that park you looked up, it's all showing like new images that have all cleaned over.
is it really?
I'm sure I
my
can find
God.
some, but like just I tried doing a quick search and it was,
Yeah.
I was able to find them with a deep search, but I was trying to find them real quick while we were talking. It was just all showing it like
Of
today,
course.
looking all nice.
Man, now see.
And they were sacrificing dogs there. They found carcasses. I saw satanic stuff
Mass
was driven all
grave.
So
Yeah.
100% were doing these satanic rituals.
Oh yeah, no, it's there's no doubt that this was being and again I think they utilized the MC clubs for protection and security for the rituals whenever they were being engaged in
What were the MC clubs?
various motorcycle clubs in the area. Yeah,
Yeah, because they know they'll do
they'll basically
do whatever makes you disappear.
Mhm. You had
And a lot of them have usually some type of ties to some police forces
Exactly.
and
oh for sure.
little protection. I mean, obviously they still get busted sometimes, but a lot of times they do have people they're paying off. And
Yeah, no doubt. But I will say, again, to attempt to prove that David Berkowitz did not act alone is what most people should focus on, because I think that's so obviously the case. And when you have these mind control connections, it's important to actually believe that it's possible that this came during the time when he was in the Army, and this is where the Son of Sam comes in, Uncle Sam. Right, it's a little bit different.
Uncle Sam, interesting.
Yeah, I never
Son of
really.
Sam, Uncle Sam. Yeah,
I never really
Sometimes
considered that.
popular, like, oh, maybe there's a connection there.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
And that's
coincidence,
what
maybe not. That's what these things you have to like.
Right. That's what someone did actually say, one of his Army buddies. So you had essentially David Berkowitz joining the Army in 1971 and then stationed in Korea. So he's honorably discharged in 1974. He serves in the Army. He's known to have used LSD, right, during this time associated with the mind control operation and experiments. So following his arrest, the New York Daily News in 1977 ran a headline story that said, Sam changed after LSD trips. So this detailed David Berkowitz's devastating personality transformation after taking the drug while in Korea, LSD. So he
was in a military mission when he was in Korea.
Yeah, exactly. And so he's in the Army in Korea.
So it
and
wasn't just randomly out there.
Exactly. And so they basically claim there was a severe personality change that was documented in letters to friends and things of that nature. And so you have the Salt Lake Tribune. They then go on the record claiming more indictments likely in Son of Sam murders, but an Army friend said Berkowitz adopted the Son of Sam nickname to signify his belief that he was a pawn of the government, symbolized by Uncle Sam.
Interesting.
So Terry Peterson was the Army buddy. He was from McFarland, Wisconsin or something. So he said they spent a year together in Korea, and he said, quote, when he'd complain about what the Army was doing to him, and he took a lot of basically static after he failed those he filed the conscientious objector forms is what he did, right? Mm-hmm. And so I guess he took a lot of flack for it. After the fact, but
he didn't want to go and kill kids.
I guess so. So he claimed, the Army buddy Terry Peterson, that he'd just tell him, "Well, you signed up, and now you're just a son of Sam." So he claimed what he meant was that he was just a soldier for Uncle Sam and was obligated to serve his country. But he took that to obviously mean that he had become a pawn, a tool in some big game that the establishment was making him play. He said, I'm certain that's where the name Son of Sam came from. We used to call each other that all the time. Peterson. Yeah, so now there's a book by Michael Hoffman called Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare. And he talks about after joining the Army, Berkowitz became part of the special project for profiled candidates, all right, during which he was dosed with drugs, including LSD. So the Army buddy, Terry Peterson, he would obviously say that Berkowitz said he was the son of Sam. He was trying to say he was the son of Uncle Sam. So that is what it looks like, a creation of certain elements in the U.S. government, and Berkowitz joining the U.S. Army, entering a special program for profiled candidates where drugs were being administered. So I think that's, at the very least, it's a possibility, right? That he was honestly a victim of some sort of behavioral modification experimentation while on base in the Army and in Korea. So that's what many people have suggested, at the very least, who've investigated this case. But again, that's something that we have no concrete evidence.
Like some of the stuff
of
concrete evidence.
Exactly.
There's a speculation, but there's reasons why you're speculating. It's not like randomly why you're speculating it. I think that sounds very likely.
Right. And he goes on to deny, he always denied that the fact that he killed innocent people, which is strange, and that he deserved his multiple life sentences. He claimed that, and always maintained, just one vital fact, that he did not act alone. So not only that, but the Son of Sam's murders were not random acts of violence carried out by a solo lone perpetrator, but they were, as crazy as it sounds, ritual sacrifices carried out by a highly organized satanic cult.
Yeah, he says this himself, right?
He says this himself.
Tons of people said there was multiple. They didn't describe him at all. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of connections, like I said, actually connecting him to this church.
Right. And that's why I think just knowing, right, that obviously what he has to say about these ritual sacrifices being carried out by this organized satanic cult. This is an interview with Maury Terry, right? And so he had been investigating the Son of Sam case at that time for over 2 decades already. And when he conducts this interview with David Berkowitz, and so he had basically, in the interview, Terry was looking to confirm important facts that he wanted to know. David Berkowitz would go on the record, hopefully, and so that he was hoping to uncover. And so there was evidence that the 1977 killing, at least one of the Son of Sam killings, of the 20-year-old Stacy Moskowitz was most likely filmed, like I said, by someone who was hiding in a van. So if this is true, then the entire concept of acting alone is it just easily disproved. Yeah. So it would also signify that honestly these murders were actually a collective effort. You know what I mean? And that essentially you have the production of snuff films being implicated as well, as far as snuff film material to be sold in underground circles in the cult, and more than just the cult, I guess. Obviously, they would just be facilitating the distribution. But anyway, and so Maury Terry asked him in this interview about this mysterious van, and Berkowitz answers, there was some filming going on. Somebody wanted to film it for somebody else or whatever. Or are you stating to me then, this is what Maury Terry says, that they made a snuff film from that van of the shooting of Stacy Moskowitz and Robert Vellante? Maybe that's what you can call it, David Berkowitz responds. Was this the cult group itself that was responsible for the Son of Sam murders, or was there something else that went on? There was another group, David Berkowitz responds, a more elite group, hidden into it and woven into it, you know. Now, in his last answer, Berkowitz states that the coven he belonged to, named the Children, was infiltrated by an elite group that pushed them further into dark magic, to black magic, to the dark side.
Pushed them even darker.
Mm-hmm. He said, so Maury Terry believed that this elite group was the Process Church of the Final Judgment, and obviously a very prominent satanic, honestly, it's a satanic network that unfortunately isn't involved in abducting children, you know, and as well.
Yeah.
So you have basically, for him to have been admitting this in the interview, I think is fascinating. And he says that this cult inevitably went underground just following the Son of Sam case, and
too much heat on it.
Exactly. They even uprooted from upstate New York at the time and essentially fled.
Well, I don't know if there's any connection, but like the David Norman, he was likely, you know, the guy we talked about earlier, who was the kidnapping and probably making snuff films, almost certainly. Was he in the same locations the Process Church have places? Because he was in Houston, Chicago.
Yes.
Process Church have locations in Chicago, right?
Dallas and Chicago for sure. And
this is where this guy ran this operation of all this. So there could potentially be a connection.
Ted Bundy was implicated as well. And this is by, Detective James Rothstein.
Twice, like a murder, escaped prison twice, seems a little level.
He was in charge of the Vice-Related Crimes Division to testify to the New York State Select Committee on Crime, Detective James Rothstein. And he followed. He was tipped off by a criminal informant of German Shepherd, a mass grave of German Shepherd dogs in Untermyer Park, and something known as the Devil Cave, the Devil's Cave. So he goes down there and he discovers this to be true, and he then begins to kind of, he realized there was a building right next to Untermyer, and that building happened to be owned by members of the Process Church. And so he instantly became curious as to, are they directly involved with what's happening here, and you know, obviously being engaged in at the park itself. And he very quickly was exposed by this criminal informant the reality of the cult having these ritualistic sacrificial meetings and ceremonies in Untermyer and other parks as well, but that specifically. Then he follows the process. He says they head west after the Son of Sam, and basically, even uprooted. In one chapter, he said that was very prominent from New York, relocated to Atlanta just before the Atlanta child murders happened.
Wow.
Yes.
So all these other serial killers, they're right there.
Yep. And he also said that it went through Wisconsin, it went through Michigan, which was Francis Sheldon as well. And he was claiming that basically when it went through Wisconsin, he mentioned Ted Bundy as well, which I thought was interesting in terms of having a connection.
Because he seemed like protected by the police. And it's weird because we're seeing like different layers. Like the Norman was into like sexual gratification with gay boys, pedophilia,
right?
But also there's murders involved. Here's like an occult level, but they also had like government protection.
Yeah.
So he said, I don't see a direct connection with that Norman and this process cult. The fact that they're all the same locations doing similar things.
Exactly. And honestly, there might be. It just would take a lot of... I
think there probably is. Yeah. I just haven't seen it.
Exactly.
I bet there probably is, and I'm going to dig and look for one. Yeah. But it's just like...
I will as well.
Because I feel like there is one. If anyone has looked into these cases watching us and see one, DM me or whatever.
Absolutely.
There are some other, not a lot, but there are some other people that did some research on this.
Right.
That started digging on it. The people that have done it have gone, I think, because not a lot of people are doing it, get like, oh shit, there's like so much uncovered.
Right. And that's why, honestly, this is impossible to if I entirely focused directly on presenting the Son of Sam case from the very beginning, it would have.
So you kind of went through the church.
We could
exactly.
have possibly achieved it. Yeah,
it's like it's not as simple as just the murder. No. It's really about these occults, and you think he was just kind of a low level guy, and they pinned it on. Which
you read the occult layers of this, the language used in the letters written. I think it was the letters weren't written by David Berkowitz. I think it was a group, almost a amalgamation of members of the process were kind of like, sort of writing these letters. It was it was interesting because they wanted to cause an ultimate reaction is what they truly wanted.
They were trying to just drive the city to fear, which is the opposite. Most of these people are trying to pick up transients, making it quiet.
Exactly.
So that's very interesting.
It is.
But they're also, Manson was the same thing.
Yeah, it really was. And
I guess the Atlanta murders, was that being driven by, were they trying to drive fear with those? Because all these black kids kept disappearing.
At the very least, it plagued the black community. Like the African-American community in Atlanta was like, devastated, and still to this day, there's very little, trust in.
Yeah, they thought it was like, white. Maybe there was a black pinned on it, but they thought it was like white people.
Man, so many people.
I don't think it was the racist angle they were pushing.
I do think that
it could have been white.
It was involved with Iran-Contra, and that there was a chapter of the KKK that was being leveraged and exploited by the intelligence apparatus to run Iran-Contra through. They were basically distributing weapons and drugs through the international airport in Georgia there.
Damn.
Yeah, so just knowing that you had CIA planes basically being, accepted in by members of this local KKK chapter, and then there's like a credible investigative files that prove that there's connections to this, and also. It's fascinating that Wayne Williams goes on the record claiming that he was a CIA asset and was later exposed.
He killed tons of children.
Mm-hmm.
We're like 2 hours in, but I have a couple more questions, and I know you have a few things you have to say. Just real quick, was he the guy that they tried killing in prison after he started talking about the cults, or was that a different serial
That was
killer?
David Berkowitz, yeah. So
that's what I thought. They tried, once he started talking about these cult things, they sent someone to try to slit his throat.
Exactly.
Was it slit his throat? Which that seems to be the ritualistic way.
Yeah, and they slit his throat 100%. And he attempted to. David Berkowitz wanted the Son of Sam case to be resolved, right, legitimately, and he wanted the truth to come out as much as possible, but he couldn't outright just rat out any of the cult members because it turns out it would put his family directly in danger.
Oh, they'd kill his family and stuff too,
and his own life at risk as well.
He got his throat slit, and he one of those serial killers. So he started talking about the occult stuff he was doing. They targeted him.
He goes, I don't really know, David Berkowitz says this, I don't really know how to begin this letter, but at one time I was a member of an occult group. Being sworn to secrecy or face death, I cannot reveal the name of the group, nor do I wish to. This group contained a mixture of satanic practices which included the teachings of Aleister Crowley and Eliphas Levi.
There we go.
It was and still is totally blood-oriented, and I am certain you know just what I mean. The Coven's doctrines are a blend of ancient Druidism, the teachings of the secret order of the Golden Dawn, black magic, and a host of other unlawful and obnoxious practices. As I said, I have no interest in revealing the Coven, especially because I've almost met sudden death on several occasions, once by half an inch, and several others have already perished under mysterious circumstances. These people will stop at nothing, including murder. They have no fear of man-made laws or the Ten Commandments. I think it is imperative that I educate certain people, the people whose job it is to clean up after this coven. Of course, I am talking about the authorities. Actually, it is my duty as a citizen of this planet to do so. But it would be up to those concerned people to do their own investigating. Knowing the fearlessness and dedication this group possesses, I fear greatly for my family. To break away completely is impossible because of a pact each new member signs in his own blood. Also, each new and carefully screened recruit supplies a picture or pictures of all his or her family members, plus their addresses. These items are used, if necessary, as tools for blackmail, coercion, and eventually physical harm should one attempt to betray the group. So
that explains why, between that threatening some of these cases, maybe doing horrific blackmail.
Right. And I think just knowing that, I believe it was many of the sketches happened to essentially resemble close other members of the coven that were close, David Berkowitz knew. He even confirmed in one interview that one of the suspects in the sketches was actually a high-level woman that I had mentioned before that came in from out of town to take part in the ritual killings, which is just, I think, one of the murders happened outside of a club known as the Eliphas Club, and that's an occult. Again, Eliphas Levi is one of the architects of, like an Aleister Crowley, of this occult ideology.
Interesting.
So it's like...
It's interesting how you see these same figures all over in the same secret societies.
And just so, you know, I think knowing David Berkowitz, like he legitimately attempts to, and he talks about Roy Cohn for a brief moment at one point, which is fascinating.
Trump's mentor, blackmailer.
Right. Maury Terry reported this, and it was part of Berkowitz attending parties in Connecticut at the house of Roy Cohn. David Berkowitz.
But he was at the house of Roy Cohn?
Yes. Donald Trump's mentor.
This is Donald Trump's mentor, Roy Cohn.
Yeah. Where's my Roy Cohn, says Donald Trump.
Blackmail expert, yeah.
Yes. Now, people should realize as well.
Makes sense. The whole network, the Epstein network thing is not random.
No. And I think just realizing that basically, you know, again, he happened to run a pedophile blackmail network, obviously, in terms of Roy Cohn, strongly resembles that of even Jeffrey Epstein. But, you know, I think
it was before they've done it, and he's not the first one either.
No, not at all. And it was John DeCamp, right, the author of the Franklin Cover-Up. So it was a sexual blackmail operation with Edwin Wilson during this Iran-Contra operation or operator, and it led to, Ted Shackley's secret team during the JFK Operation 40 assassination. So this is merely a continuation of the one set up by Roy Cohn, is what they had claimed, right? As far as Epstein's network.
Just took it over.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating?
Became the guy. Yeah, it's like I haven't gone deep into it, but I could see there's this connection. They just passed it on, and it's still going today.
Yeah, and they said basically Roy Cohn was heavily involved during the McCarthy era, like if you remember the McCarthy hearings and everything.
Yeah, he was tied in with that, right?
Louis Rosenstiel. He was directly tied in with Rosenstiel and J. Edgar Hoover during the Blue Suite parties.
He had blackmail and J. Edgar Hoover.
Yeah, at the Plaza Hotel, which Trump would later purchase. As well as Adnan Khashoggi's yacht that was already fully rigged with audio-visual blackmail.
Trump was part of this same game. Well, I know you have a ton more, but is there any key points to hit with the Son of Sam thing before we wrap? Because I think we're over 2 hours, so we need to...
Yeah, you're right. And honestly, I think what we really should I think more than anything, I think we've underestimated this concept of various satanic cult groups well-versed in occult principles. You know, basically, I think I staged a question, I remember, in my personal episode when I covered this. I said, what if an organization existed providing bold connections between the most infamous serial killers in American history, various satanic cult groups well-versed in occult principles with deep ties to elite secret societies, and sinister covert action wielding insidious clandestine operational methods? Have we largely been conditioned to oversimplify the underlying motivations driving such irrational human action as disturbing and evil as serial ritual murder? Whether it be through calculated deception or the desperate need for a plausible explanation, the end result remains the same. So I think as we continue on this pursuit of truth, objectively speaking, it's only in the vein of attempting to find the truth, which inevitably seems too frightening to even...
Well, it's frightening to the people.
Right.
And then also, this is being covered up at the highest level. That's what's disturbing. Exactly. It seems like the FBI, the DOJ, they're all stepping in to hide the Epstein. Not that this is related to Epstein files, but it kind of is in a way, how they're stepping in to be like, no, you guys aren't getting those.
Right.
And it goes back with all kinds of these files, how like the DOJ or the State Department stepped in and destroyed those other just insane records of like kills, and like how these police departments, the FBIs, they come in to like kill investigations. Right. How there was, I think, the CIA, they called the Finder's Code, again, all these kidnapped kids, an internal matter. It's over and over we've seen the same pattern at the highest level. And it's
U.S. Customs agent.
Too crazy to be true until you see it over and over again.
Yeah, and their careers are destroyed if they attempt to actually blow the whistle.
Sometimes killed.
Sometimes killed. A lot of the times.
Was that the one with the Franklin scandal?
Oh man,
he flew to Chicago.
Gary Caradori,
he had evidence connecting it all. Went to pick up in Chicago, which is where the Gacy murder was connected in, and then boom, the plane went down.
Exactly.
They killed him in Franklin scandal.
Right.
There's all kinds. There's an investigator that was doing with the octopus thing, which is tied into some of this stuff. He was murdered.
Danny Casolaro. Yeah. It's never ending, and even with OKC, we talked about it yesterday, right? You have
You get too close, you get killed.
yeah, Kenneth Trinidad, right? He's mistaken for John Doe too, and they absolutely executed him. You know, I mean, they murdered him and beat him to death in solitary confinement essentially. After it's a fascinating story, but his brother Jesse Trinidad's kind of committed his life to exposing all of that. For unfortunately, he hasn't achieved as much as he should have, because obviously I think the fix is in, and it's designed
want
for
to
him
make
to
it
fail.
sound like you're some crazy lunatic, and at first it does, until you start looking. That's why I try to take a couple cases individually, break them down, then you start being like, holy shit,
Honestly, man. But for David Berkowitz himself to say that they were making sacrifices, legitimately having sacrificial ceremonies to Moloch, to these various gods who wanted fire sacrifices. He said Moloch specifically.
Wanting that for thousands of years.
Yeah, and so it's just, and then obviously having read his letter that I just did to you in regard to, Aleister Crowley, Eliphas Levi, the philosophy in itself.
People, the philosophy, the secret societies, and I'm still trying to figure this out. I'm ways off, but I am seeing there's clearly
and
something going on.
For them to attempt to execute him when he's blowing the whistle and talking to Maury Terry, he basically goes radio silent after that, and said that he did it not only
his throat.
not only for his own well-being,
his family,
but for his only last remaining family member he felt the need to protect, which was his father, who still had a relationship with him even after everything.
You could understand,
Hell yeah,
you want to tell people if they're going to kill it. Well, where can people find you? I know you have a podcast, support you, that type of stuff.
Yeah, so the Underclass podcast.
You go deep in all these conspiracy theories, obviously. But like I said, you do lots of documentation. So
thank you. And that's really the main reason I want to get some of this right. And like legitimately, it's the cost of being wrong in cases such as this.
Thing wrong, then they try to discredit everything. That's what I'm trying to be. It's like, okay, I need to be careful and start looking at this stuff, because you fuck up one thing, then they discredit the whole thing.
And it's also out of respect for the victims and everything they've unfortunately endured throughout. Just realizing, because you imagine having gone through such traumatic abuse and then having people essentially gaslight you and tell you
You're
that
crazy,
that
they're false memories, or like
false memories.
Well, here's the thing: a lot of times these people are a little fucked up from the terrible abuse, so they attack their credibility that way.
Yeah, and
but
if
you're a little fucked up if you've been abused this bad.
And if you remember Paul Bonacci, right? He says that they provided him with suicidal altars. And also altars that they could trigger. He said he stopped answering phone calls because they could trigger in the course of a conversation, code word. Yeah. All of a sudden you're triggered into a separate altar. He said no memories whatsoever.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the point is that he said that they would attempt to do this in order to trigger an altar that would help damage his credibility in regard to authorities investigating.
That's what they do with all these, like they did in the Epstein files, the victims. They always, maybe they'll get one little date wrong or something, then they go after their credibility.
Let alone a kill switch for a suicidal altar, which they claim legitimately was a part of the mind control programming for many different assets and victims. So if that is the case, and I believe wholeheartedly that it is through the exposure of the evidentiary files and statements and it's just so many different examples that Operation Open Eyes. I mean, we could sit here for almost an infinite amount of time, I feel like.
Exactly.
And
that's why I figured like it's over 2 hours time just to fucking, if there's any final things, it feels like we're probably good, right? Thanks so much.
I think so. I think honestly, David Berkowitz did not act alone is the conclusion you can come to. And beyond that, look into the philosophy of the Process Church and the overlapping tentacles that it really is an octopus of global control in terms of this network. And so I encourage everyone to.
That's why it's hard. It's like, because it is like a network connected, but then we have several other podcasts where we try to break down, piece of it at a time, but it is all connected, so it makes it tricky.
Exactly. But anyway, nothing but love, Jake. I appreciate you, brother, and the Underclass podcast where everyone can find me. So.
Final thing for me, if you want to support the podcast, Fight Back Podcast, since I'm demonetized everywhere now, you can buy merch. Add other products or donate anything you want. So appreciate it. Regardless, I'm keeping my podcast around. I'm not going to let them win by shutting me down. So thanks so much.
Don't ever do it. Of course, brother.
In the age of doxing, hacks, and blackmail, everyone knows how important online privacy has become. You can protect your privacy online with a VPN. But did you know that the most popular VPNs have been acquired by Israeli companies with direct ties to the IDF? Get real privacy you can trust with VP.net. An independent American VPN that won't route your traffic through Israel. Go to vp.net/fightback to receive a discount, or you can use promo code FIGHTBACK. This will help support my free speech podcast. As many of you know, I have many controversial guests, so that comes at a cost of being demonetized everywhere. So if you want to support the program, go to fightbackpodcast.com, and I have all kinds of merch on there, whether it's jiu-jitsu, fighting, political, and other accessories. And thanks for the support.